Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, everybody, welcome to Truthzilla. I am Megan here with my friends Scott and Ed and our good friend Ricky Varandas from the Ripple Effect podcast. Hi, Ricky.
What's up, guys? Thanks for having me, and thanks for also being on my show at the same time.
Yeah, well, thanks for having us too.
Thanks for having us. Absolutely.
Well, I wanted to catch up because it's been like your journey. It's been awesome to kind of watch it, to see you guys from the beginning and then just seeing you guys grow. It's just, I feel like a cheerleader at times, but I just love seeing just people who are passionate and sincere. And you guys have had people on, I mean, so many awesome guests. I mean, Jason Burmis has been on, Dr. Kendra Becker. I know you had Brian Festa on not too long ago. And listening to these shows, one thing I didn't know until actually listening to more of your shows with these type of guests is how passionate you guys were about the same topic that I'm seem to be extra passionate about, and that's the big pharma vaccine issue.
Oh yeah.
That was the stuff. Was that the issue that really got you guys motivated to do something?
Well, I mean, I'm speaking from myself. That was my passion coming into this project. It's funny, like our history. I was, I have a vaccine injured child, and I was the parent who was. Their mother was right off the bat like, this vaccine is causing problems, and I was like, no, it's not the vaccine. There's no way it's the vaccine. She was staying up late at night researching and doing all. I was like, it's not that. Like I was honestly totally on the other side of this thing until one day I just started looking into it myself, and I would, oh my God. The science isn't there. For me, it was the Vaccine Conversation podcast. That was the one that kind of red pilled me on vaccines. I already knew 9/11 was BS and stuff like that. I was red pilled in a lot of ways, but I thought big pharma wouldn't just lie to us on that level and hurt our children, right?
Of course not.
So when I started seeing all the data and the facts and really the lack of science, I would say, really the fact that they don't have a vax versus unvax study, the fact that they don't use double-blind placebo studies on all the vaccines, that they kind of do the science in a way to avoid these things, right? They do it so they can kind of get away with things without uncovering the possibilities that, as the parents are pointing to all the time, parents are going, this is what happened to my kid, and big pharma is saying, no, it wasn't. So anyways, I started talking to Scott, who was a lot deeper into conspiracies, I would say, right? He was a lot deeper in that. And at that point, you weren't even red pilled on vaccines. That's right?
100%, man. So Ed and I, we've known each other for years prior to this, right? And this was just towards just last spring, you know what I mean? And we started talking. Originally, the conversation was like, let's make some t-shirts, right? And get the word out there. We can just make memes and t-shirts and stuff like that. And then Ed actually had the idea of like, let's just make a podcast. Now that was very interesting too, like what he said though, because yeah, dude, I could talk about reptilians and freaking, SH, all that stuff, right? All day long. Connecticut, Newtown, Connecticut. We talk about that all day long, man. Absolutely. Yeah. But he's like, the vaccine thing, I'm still like, yeah, but isn't the science settled on that? I mean, I don't know, right? Like I still wasn't there. I hadn't even looked into it. And so obviously Ed kind of steered me, Del Bigtree, Melissa Floyd, and it kind of sent me down that path. And I was like, oh God. And obviously because of all the COVID stuff and that looming over our heads, it became really imperative to get up to speed very quickly. And just from what I determined too, yeah, I'm like, oh, wow.
And I think, you look at when COVID happened, it was like every conspiracy hair on the back of my neck went up at the same time. And especially looking at big pharma, just really in that world, it was like this. It just made sense. Like, this is garbage, right? Yeah. And, so anyways, history is history, but honestly, but then Megan, I met Megan 30 minutes before we recorded our first podcast. So
this is true. Yeah. So Scott and I had known each other about a year and a half now or so. And it's interesting because the only real awakening that I had to any of this was just kind of the glimpse into the global pedophilia ring. And that was sort of my focus and my interest and my passion to try to, fend against. for a long, long time. And I was in school for law enforcement, and I thought that I would pursue a career to find justice for some of these things. And I ended up not doing that, raising a family instead. But that sort of just remained in the back of my mind, like always that undercurrent, always just so aware of it. And then Scott and I met, and I think like one of the first conversations we ever had, I had just gotten Bill Cooper's book, Behold a Pale Horse.
Yeah.
And so we're driving, and I said, so by the way, have you ever heard of this guy, Bill Cooper? And he knew exactly who I was talking.
What?
I know. We were just like, just like, oh my gosh, do I know you from a different life? So
I thought she was like a handler, like sent. And I'm like, I was just like, oh, well, I'm really just glad that they chose like such a cool chick to come be my handler. Like, this is great. Love it.
Yeah. For a while, like, but we were hitting it off, but he was like, are you sure you're not a spy of some kind? Like, so anyways, but it was all just kind of like lighthearted, and I wasn't delving too heavy into it. But my background in terms of just my own core beliefs and spirituality and things like that, I was hugely aware of what New World Order was without even really understanding or even being aware that Agenda 21, quote unquote, existed. And then they said that they needed to shut the schools down for 2 weeks. And I knew immediately that it was New World Order. I was like, overnight, that was it. And for that 14 days, I was just like hovering on that hub, like, okay, I mean, I'm trying to be hopeful. Like, we're going to go back, right? It's going to be, our kids are going back to school. Like, we're not going to see New World Order in my lifetime. Surely, like, that's not the life that I wanted to live, you know? And it turns out that that's what it is. So, it's interesting though, because right at the beginning, Scott and I were visiting, and you know, everyone on lockdown, you know, a lot of us like-minded people were, you know, getting together, having meals, you know, on the down low in quarantine, and talking about these things. And he was saying, you know, my friend and I were thinking about, you know, Ed and I are thinking about doing this podcast, and I was wondering if you might like want to do, you know, because at this point so I'm kind of a new truther. I said a conspiracy theorist like 10 months ago, and then it turned into conspiracy analyst. Now I'm just a truther. So, but I'm kind of a brand new baby, a warrior for truth. Yeah. But what's happened for me is I'm just getting like a boatload of information from the universe on all of these rabbit holes, like simultaneously all at once over the past, you know, most of a year. So normally my mind is, I mean, it's blown in that I'm not surprised, but it's just like, I can't even believe that we're going through this. And so it's all come together very, very fast for me now. But anyway.
But also credit where credit's due, Ricky. You have played a huge part in where we are today, and just a big thank you. You know, I mean, coming on the Union, and you coming on our show early on, and then the Union and the Unwanted, and just that's where we've met half of our guests at this point. You know, so just a lot of props for that. Thank you.
Well, such a trooper, Ricky. I'm glad to be talking to you now, because when you came on for us, whatever 6-7 months ago,
episode like 6 or 7,
I'm pretty sure I didn't say one word to you the whole time. Yeah. So I get very nervous. What's that?
Sometimes it's my fault because I don't stop talking. So it's not.
No, it was definitely, so like for the first like 5-6 months that we sat here, I was like having these panic attacks before we were going, like so stressed out, and like my whole shirt would be soaking wet in the back, and I'm just like rolling sweat and so stressed out and messing up all my words and losing my train of thought. So that was what was happening when you came on that day. I was so focused. Okay, I'm going to be cool. Totally be chill with this dude. We're going to have a good conversation. And the rest of the time I was just like, oh my God, please nobody talk to me. I can't breathe. What's happening? So I'm starting to get out of that, like tiny bit, God, you're doing so good. But, and I'll get there. I'll get there more and more.
For myself, it took a long time to not get that. I would have like mini anxiety attacks sometimes before shows, because a little bit was insecurity of like your intelligence, not knowing. I mean, in many cases, your only interaction with the guest is when you finally are talking and recording. Yeah. So people don't realize, like, the second you're in front of a microphone and you know it's being recorded, as much as you want to act like you can talk as casually as you would when it's not recording and there's not a microphone, it's really hard to recreate that. And in time, you get better at it. And with certain guests too, like that's the other thing. I'm trying to think who made me nervous for the first time in a long time recently, because now I don't get so nervous. You know, I try not to overthink things. Like I almost used to over prepare, and in the process of over preparing, it would make me overthink things. Where like I'm like, okay, not that I under prepare now, but like anybody I'm having on, it's like you guys, you're having on people that you're a fan of. So it's like preparing means what? Like I listen to a podcast that I probably already heard, or watch a documentary I probably already watched, and I'm just kind of rewatching it to kind of, see if anything sticks out that I might want to bring up. So it's not too hard, but yeah, I mean, there is always that fear of like, especially if I'm talking to somebody that hasn't done a lot of interviews, like there's always like, okay, are we gonna, is it gonna be casual? Or are they gonna be a little uptight? Are they gonna be, whatnot? Like sometimes the people that are the easiest to talk to are people who do a lot of interviews, because you hear them on other shows, you're like, oh, they're super cool, they're super easy to kind of chat with. So but it was a long time before that feeling really went away. And I think the longer the show goes, the easier it is. Like I remember when Mickey Willis was on, I was a little nervous because I was such a fan, and I was so excited to get a hold of him finally. And then I know like an hour and a half from the conversation, it didn't even feel like a podcast anymore. You just felt like you were talking. And same thing with the last one I just did with Christian. Same thing. It was just like those real long ones. And I think I said it in the intro, like I hope people hold on till the end of the shows, because when you talk for that long, you never know where the conversation is going to take you. And sometimes like really late into the conversation, an hour in, 2 hours in, somebody brings something up that you're like, oh shit, this is so interesting. I hope people stick around to listen to this part of the conversation. So, but yeah, it is one of those things where I can see from your perspective, Megan, like when you're new to all this, like I couldn't imagine getting all this information at once, because I feel like it can be a little overwhelming. It can be a little, I think in some cases, and it's a compliment that you can handle that, because I think in some cases when you try to talk to somebody about this stuff and you do give them information overload, their first reaction is either like, don't believe it, or immediately start arguing with you and or whatnot. So I think that could be some of the problems with people from our side trying to discuss it with, like, I guess a lack of better term, a normie, because you can get so excited about like, okay, I feel like they're kind of engaging with me, and then all of a sudden you're like, am I giving them too much information? It's like you can
see them start to tune out, or they start to get a little bit of that fluoridation just goes across their eyes. You're just like, okay, that's enough for now. Go home and think about this. We'll plant more seeds later. So
for sure. And like I always say on the show, like you never know how much you're chipping away. And when they talk to somebody else, or they run into another show or another documentary article or whatever, like we're all chipping away. We're all doing our part. And we never know when that moment's going to be where finally they're like, holy shit, like there's too many dots. I'm connecting them. There's something here, and but to bring up something that Ed brought up, and not to cut you off, Megan, because it seemed like you were about to say, but there is a vaccine, because this is really important. There is a vaccinated versus unvaccinated. Have you guys heard about this? The
Dr. Paul Thomas that just came out, that they suspended his license 5 days later.
And so he was actually just on our friend Ernest Hancock's show. Yeah, I think this morning or yesterday morning. But not Dr. Paul Thomas, but the guy who did a study with him, Dr. James Lyon Wheeler, and
he's great too. He's amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, for people listening, they actually did have a study that got published, and with no
reviewed
explanation, they just pulled Dr. Paul Thomas his license. And do you know more about it, Ed? Do you want to get into it?
Oh, I just well, what I would do is I would direct people to the High Wire. Dell had an interview with Dr. Paul Thomas like right after it happened, and they went through the exact reasons they cited for why they suspended his license. And he went through each one and it said exactly why it's total BS. It's total bunk. I mean, we all know that, but if you want to go through it with him, it'll take you right through it. So it was probably a couple weeks ago.
And he was also, I think both of them were also on Spiro's YouTube or on his YouTube channel. I don't know if he has a podcast, but I know you can get it still on YouTube or wherever he is. And then he was on Ernest Hancock's Declare the Truth. So definitely check those interviews out if you guys want to know more about it. But
for sure,
it is one of those things where I feel like the reason why one of these studies haven't been done prior to this is because they're afraid of what they're going to find. And it's
of course.
And even James Wheeler, he said on Ernest's show that I told him in advance, regardless what the outcome is of the study, I'm going to publish it. He's like, I'm not an anti-vax guy. I'm not a pro-vax guy. I'm a scientist. I look at, information and I come up with a conclusion. And he was, so he's not a biased person. He's not somebody who's going to be, saying, hey, I'm pushing for this because, it proves that kids who get vaccinated aren't as healthy as unvaccinated kids, which is a really important thing to put out there, because I think too many unvaccinated parents are afraid of talking about it and afraid of like kind of sharing with other people that like, yeah, I don't vaccinate my kids. So parents, when they hear pediatricians tell them like, you have to vaccinate your kids, it's so dangerous if you don't, they initially think like, okay, well, I don't know anybody who hasn't vaccinated their kids. So maybe they're right. Maybe I am putting my kid in danger, So I think that is a important thing. I mean, I'm one of those people that I'm very outspoken. So I'm not ashamed of telling people what I believe or where I stand on certain issues. And I'm also not afraid of engaging in conversation. That's mostly why, because it's like, okay, if somebody disagrees with me, I'm okay with that. We can talk about it, So, but I think that is an important thing. And, that's the thing about you guys, is that I'm glad, and people listening, like, they don't realize how many people who have vaccinated injured children are the ones who are the most vocal in this community, like Dr. Brian Hooker. You look at you guys. So many people in this community are Brian Festa, but another one, him and Don, the other co-founder of his organizations. So it's and something that Del Bigtree has said on the show, which I'd like to get your guys' opinion on. Is he said this, and I don't know when I heard him say this, if it was on his show, my show, wherever, but he said at one point and he made, it was such a good point, that the last thing parents want to do is come to the conclusion that something they could have prevented caused it. And the reason I say this is because so often people say, well, the parents, they're just looking for answers, and they're just, pointing fingers, or they're just blaming it on the vaccine or whatever. It's like, if you're coming up with like, okay, what caused this? What could have happened? I could see why you would want that to be the last resort. Like, if that's the thing that you finally come to the conclusion that like maybe this could have caused some type of cognitive issues or whatever, like, I can see where there could be some denial seeping in, some regret, some guilt. And if you finally come to that conclusion, it's because you've almost, in some cases, exhausted all other options. And do you find that to be true, guys?
Certainly. I mean, I would say, I'm the living proof of that, right? Because I was the one denying it. And then at one point I did my own research, right? And I say did my own research. I listened to some podcasts, and then I started looking into things, right? So, but I had heard a lot of the information, and, it is, you don't want to be the source of that problem, but it's also, it's so much easier. Life is so much easier if just what they're telling you is correct, and you can just go along, and you can just kind of, you're with everyone around you, right? Like, if you can kind of support the cause that most people are on that side, it's easier. It's harder to look at it and go, man, maybe they are wrong. And then you have to really do all that research independently. And like today, you have to really dig to find that research. Even just a couple of years ago when I was looking into that information, it was more readily accessible than it is today.
And no, it doesn't occur to people to just go and research it on their own. Like when my oldest kids were really young, it wasn't even something that even occurred to most people to question, like just in the 20 years since my oldest has, he's 21 now. But it really was not something. I mean, I had home births with my kids, and I had a midwife who talked to us about, making informed choices about vaccines. And she was really the first person ever. I mean, I grew up in a house where, everyone was vaccinated. We did, what was healthy, quote unquote, what would keep us well. Everyone was big on circumcision in my family. We did what the medical profession said was healthy and good and what was normal. And then when I was carrying my first, and I heard that, maybe there was some other side to these vaccines, I still only really, I didn't even understand about vaccine injury. I had no idea that people had been harmed by them. I was just more coming like as a young mom, like, well, I kind of want to be natural with my kids. So if we don't need to have these things, I don't want him to have these things. And most certainly not as a brand new baby. And in my mind, I had it that, well, if we just waited till he was a little bit older and then started a series, that he would somehow be okay for it. And we did. That is exactly what we did. We waited till he was a little bit older. We started him on a little bit different schedule. And it wasn't until his younger sister, my daughter, who's now 19, went in around, I think she was about, I can't remember now, but 9 months ish. And she had a series, but she was, I mean, you could tell that she was hurt immediately. And the doctor just looked in my face, and she literally just did like this motion. She goes, well, there's nothing we can do. And I still didn't understand that maybe this happened to other people's kids. You know, it wasn't taught to me that, you know, all the questions you can ask and the things that you can ask them to record and record. So we simply just started seeking, I mean, because she just digressed. You know, she was so sick and vomiting and losing weight. She couldn't walk anymore after a short, you know, it doesn't take long for babies to lose enough weight and strength and energy or become dehydrated. But after a couple of weeks of her just going downhill, we saw a holistic doctor that also was a chiropractor. And she also kind of, you know, reiterated the dangers behind, you know, vaccines and encouraged us to look into that. And I didn't even care to look into the vaccines. I just knew we weren't going to get any more. And we wanted to try to undo what had happened. And we were, I mean, she has, like my oldest son, I know that one of the things we talked about with Dr. Becker was, you know, like he has terrible skin problems, and he always has. And I always kind of wonder, like, is that his body still trying to, you know, come to terms with those things? And what I say too to parents who are concerned that they're somehow at fault for their children being vaccine injured. I mean, yes, I understand that side, but also you can only put so much blame on your shoulders when you don't have information to make different consent or denial. We are told, broadly told, that vaccines are the way to go. We're basically told they will have you believe at a pediatrician's office and at school and anywhere else that it's not not an option often. And so you don't think that you can question it. But anyways, I sort of get off track with all of that. But
no, I mean, I love everything you're saying, but I mean, I think that you know, the one thing is with the vaccine specifically, you know, once you start diving in, it's right below the surface, things start falling apart, right? I mean, you just have to start looking at the ingredients. What is in these, right? How does a vaccine work? You know, I mean, just these questions, if you just start looking at these questions alone, those should just generate 10 more questions. And, you know, once you start digging in, I mean, I feel like it falls apart. And it's undeniable the vaccines are one of the main causes of autoimmune diseases. Yeah. It's just, you couldn't, like, that's what people should be arguing over, right? They should be doing science about this to make them better. So they don't.
Well, the first warning sign, I think, is that they don't do, they don't compare them against children who are not vaccinated. They're using the baseline of children that have already received, you know, damaging, you know, vaccines that have impaired them to be the basis of how other vaccines are responding in the human body. And that, you know, again, not information that I had 20 years ago, not information I had 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago. So it is easy once you start to look a little bit to uncover it, but you have to first have that light go off that you need to check into it. But it's interesting to me. It seems like that things that are so good for you, they don't have to be buried, covered up, propagandized, sold to me through commercials, sold to me at Walgreens pharmacy, mandated. To me, I guess I'm starting to figure out more than, like, you know, again, I came out of the public school system. So I was came out of a total left-leaning household, you know, and I thought that I knew it all. I thought I was the most awakened person. Possibly I came from a hippie mama in San Francisco, you know, and then I had to grow up a little bit and realize that all of the things that I had been told and all of the Kool-Aid I'd been swallowing was actually just keeping me in the dark under this blanket of, you know, being woke. And that's not what it was at all. And so I wasn't ever hard on myself about what happened to my daughter, but just devastated over her being injured and trying to figure out. Now that was the intentional part as a mom, where, you know, we have to look into these matters for ourselves. It's just like, you know, if you're going to go into major surgery, you know, a lot of people, they go home and they Google that, right? They Google that. They want to see what's the procedure, what's the recovery time, what can I expect? They're not just waiting for the doctor to tell them in their 15-minute consultation what to expect. They're looking into it. And I think that's, you know, we've been disempowered as a people in not just this matter, but that, you know, and in public schools, that's a big thing. They don't want children, thinking for themselves. They don't want children having critical thinking. They don't want them to, they certainly don't teach them to research anything or to question the narrative. They're not allowed to speak out of turn. That really sets us up to be good, obedient little new parents. And there's a way out of it. There's definitely a way out of it. And all these conversations help to facilitate that, like you say, Ricky.
And you just to jump right off where you said that, though, the most important thing for any parent to be able to address this is to forgive yourself. Yeah. You've been told a big, huge lie.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's in any of these issues that we look into, right?
That's true.
Like we have been told these drastic lies, and for us, whatever lie it was, for me, that was this lie. That's like, now anything the government says, or like the regulating agencies, like I'm going to question everything. Right. Cause I've seen how big of their lies can be.
Yeah.
But just a side note, though, that back to that study that you're talking of, Dr. Paul Thomas, I wish we had the numbers in front of us, but the numbers are incredible. Like the vaccinated versus unvaccinated. And I think there was 3 groups. I think there was fully vaccinated, and then partially vaccinated, and completely unvaccinated. And the numbers speak for themselves.
Yeah.
And I'm a data guy. I mean, that's speaking to what we're speaking on too. It's just like, we all learn differently. We all take in information differently. I referenced the vaccine conversation earlier because that was a very data-driven podcast. They just always went over all the data about every shot they gave, what every ingredient was in it, and here's what you can expect. And it's a pediatrician that's been giving them for, 30 years. And then another, she's a sociology major who's just really good at breaking down data. So I always want to plug their podcast too. I've wondered often, I'd love them to cross paths with kind of this group, someday.
And who are you referring to? You're referring to
the vaccine conversation. It's Melissa Floyd and Dr. Bob Sears.
I think I got a Patreon.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, I was going to say, did you? Yeah, she's actually. I've been in conversation with Melissa. We've been going back and forth about coming on, and then she asked me if I wanted Dr. Bob on. I'm like, sure, why not? So we're still in the process of figuring that out too.
I can't wait.
Yeah, she's awesome. So it's amazing how many people are in this. There's so many people, like, because even her podcast, I got into it late. She's been around in the movement for a while. I just never crossed paths with her work quite yet, where like Del Bigtree, I've been listening to him since the beginning, and some of the others. But yeah, it's the thing that you guys were talking about in regards to informed versus uninformed parents. I mean, it's so true. I've had people come to me and they're like, I feel so guilty after listening to that podcast you did about vaccinating my children. I'm like, listen, you don't feel guilty. I'm like, what you should be pissed off about is the fact that you didn't have access to all the information.
Right.
And that's what you should be upset about, because the truth is, like, you made a educated, informed decision based on the education you have and the information you have. Yes. Well, if that's being manipulated, I'm like, that's what you should be upset about, that you didn't have the other information. And the truth is, like, I'm one of those people where, like, I don't try to say I'm anti-vax, because there are people out there who got their vaccines and they're fine. I mean, and there's people who got vaccines, as you guys know, who aren't. And, so it does happen. I'm not anti peanut butter, even though peanut butter can be harmful to people. Like, but my point is, like, people should know that there's a risk to both. Like, the problem is, people think that there's only a risk in not getting vaccinated, that there's not a risk in getting vaccinated. And that's a huge issue, because that's a lie. First of all, like, I'm sure some of you guys have heard me say on the podcast, the peanut butter metaphor. It's like, it's so true. Like, if I give every kid peanut butter, somebody's going to die. So, like, there's no cocktail of ingredients you can give to every single child on earth, and there's not going to be some negative effects. There's not going to be some deaths. Of course there are. So this idea that, like, people believe the science, this has been debunked, that has been debunked. It's like, okay, forget all that. Let's just think of things logically. That's what I try to do with some people. It's like, okay, let's just look at this logically. Do you honestly believe, like, how unscientific would it be for me to say I could give every child the exact same thing and every child's going to have the exact same reaction? I'm like, that's the most unscientific thing I could say. And then if you just think, like, okay, logically, like, why are kids who are born prematurely, why are they getting the exact same dosage of vaccines? Like that doesn't make any sense. I mean, I was talking to a nurse not too long ago, one that I know in my personal life, not one that's been on the podcast, but she hopefully I can get her to talk openly one day on the show. But she talked about this, how like it's crazy that kids are born prematurely and they're giving them the same vaccines. Like, I mean, it's insanity. I mean, is there any logic in that? I mean, same thing with like the hepatitis, vaccine you give like at 6 months, like it's a sexually transmitted disease. Like
there's no reason.
What type
and
of
it's interesting to hear the pediatricians justify that one. Like it's absolutely ridiculous. And the whole thing, you hit the nail on the head. The thing is that people are making decisions out of fear that if they don't do it, that you're in danger. And two, like the whole schedule where you're doing it at this many weeks, this many months. My oldest son, we had him, we were on immunization schedule for him. By the time he was 1, I think he was 13 days prior to his first birthday, and we were getting ready to move out of state. And so we went to his pediatrician at that time and had his schedule of vaccines given so that we didn't have to worry about that. Because I was so worried about missing that deadline, right? As a brand new mom, that's what I thought. Like if you miss a deadline, you have to start over, right? And God forbid that we moved to California and he were to catch, rubella or, you know what I mean? So whatever else. So once we got to California, when the next series, it'd been a few months and the next series would have come. And so we ended up going into public health because we didn't have a pediatrician at that time. And they told us that all of his vaccines were void because they were 13 days prior to his first birthday. That it doesn't qualify under California law to meet their criteria for school, so he would have to be re-immunized.
What? And that brings up a whole bunch of other points to me. Like another thing is like, what about titer tests? Like you look at like measles, everybody's scared of measles. Like, why don't we give kids titer tests so we can test whether we need to even give them the shot? They might already have immunity to some of these diseases, right? Like we could do this.
So it's okay to get sick.
Technology's there. I mean, and we could, yeah.
That's the thing that gets me is this whole idea that we can't get sick. We can't have viruses. We can't have bacteria. We can't have, when people like, especially like when people talk about, well, I had COVID and I was sick for weeks and weeks, I'm like, so what? Life is long. It's a few weeks and it sucks for a minute. Oh, you had a hard time breathing. Listen, I don't want to be gross on air, but I had a terrible flu back in the day where I had it coming out of both ends at the same time. And that lasted for 5 days. It's horrible. But I didn't want to go get a vaccine to make sure that never again in my life might I ever contract a stomach bug. I mean, the thinking behind and the whole idea that the healthy people breathing the oxygen around us is making other people sick. Oh, yeah. I mean, I digress and get off.
Don't digress.
No. I get off the subject. But to me, these are all just so blatantly obvious things. And the whole thing behind the vaccines, when we talk about it being one size fit all medicine, to me now, 10 months ago, 12 months ago, maybe I would have seen it a little bit different, but now I just see it as part of, we talk about them wanting to wipe a lot of us out. We talk about with Agenda 21, what's coming. They've been doing it. That's what I'm aware of now. The vaccine agenda and the one size fits all medicine, the crap they're spraying in the air and the stuff that they're putting in our food, that's the genocide. That's the genocide. It's the slow genocide, and it's not happening fast enough. So here we need another little something to kick us over the edge. We need to at least make sure that those coming up behind us can't produce anymore. And that's partly what all evidence would say that that's the agenda. And we all know that Bill Gates is not this, great humanitarian. So it's just interesting to me. I mean, it literally is like every single day, I still have people looking me in my face and saying, well, you got to do what you got to do. Well, I commented on she's an acquaintance girlfriend, but I commented on an Instagram post. She had this wonderful tattoo art, henna tattoo art. I said, oh my gosh, that's amazing. I want to do that. And she sent me a private message and she said, I totally would be down to do that. We could, as long as we're masked and we can meet up outside and we could sit by each other for like up to an hour. She's like, but after I get the vaccine, things will be different. And my head's exploding. And I'm like, okay, I really want to write this girl a novel and explain to her and send her some links. And I'm like, but with that attitude at this point, like that perception, I have to be hands off on that. That's too far. That's not even a question. It's like to not even question it. Like I don't have the emotional, spiritual energy to do that with people anymore, because it's taken so much from me to just try so hard to have other people not be hurt, to have other people not go through what we've gone through. You know, there are people who are still trying to plan families. You know, I'm watching this nurse get immunized. I'm sure a lot of people have seen it by now, and she's holding her belly. You know, she's pregnant and she's getting this, she's guinea pig in front of the cameras for everyone with her unborn baby inside of her. It's flooring me. It's flooring me. So if that's still where people's mind frames are, then they need to have different conversations with different people, because I'm trying to help unite those people who actually want to live a full and happy life.
Yep.
And how many people were pregnant in the studies? Zero.
So exactly.
You're a guinea pig, you know. And the NBA, there was just an article, I think yesterday, that players are testing positive a second time. So it's like that just so I mean, regardless what reason that is, you know, it just at least should plant the seed of doubt that either like the tests are bullshit, or maybe even the virus is bullshit. I know on a recent No Agenda show, they talked about how, I forget which lab it was, where they asked the CDC for samples. They had no samples. Everything came up like influenza A or B. And they're like, this isn't what we're looking for. Like we're, you know, basically the only place the coronavirus exists, COVID-19, is on the computer. It's like this digitally created thing. Like we don't actually have a sample of it. So I believe they're suing the CDC. And so, yeah, I mean, stuff like this but like to go back to what Megan said, we shut down the world because we're supposed to stop the spread of a lethal, deadly virus. Now, when people test positive, like I was just telling somebody this the other day, I'm like, put in perspective that if somebody tells you they have cancer, what's your reaction? You're like, holy fuck, that's a death sentence, or at least could be. And that's what goes through your head. Somebody tells you they have COVID, we're like, okay, we'll see you in 10 days. I don't know. Like, you know, like we don't. So, and that's exactly.
Don't tell them you saw me.
That's the thing that we're shutting down the world for. Like, people have I mean, I said this during the war when I was like really vocal, and I still try to be, but this takes up so much of my energy. But like when I was really focusing on geopolitics and war stuff, like I would always say like it's I almost feel like the 60s era, like they kind of wanted everybody to smoke weed and eventually made it illegal so they could capitalize on our short-term memory. Because people just forget shit, and then you can like just sell them a lie now, and because they don't remember that it's different than what they told you, you know, a couple months ago. And that's how kind of wars were. Like I always looked at wars. I'm like, I'm like, how are you falling for the Syria bullshit when Iraq just happened not too long ago, and we just go, oops, yeah, we might have fucked up. But unfortunately, there's people who have PTSD. There's people who you know, will never get their loved ones back. There's Iraqis who will hate U.S. forever because we killed, you know, innocent civilians. There's tons, trillions of taxpayers' money that went to KBR and Halliburton and all these organizations, these companies. So it's like, and then we just shrug and say, oops, we fucked up, you know. And then Syria comes around, it's like, no, we believe him now. We should, Assad's a bad dude. We should really get in there, and we should do. It's like the same thing with like go throughout history. I mean, look at Vietnam. Like Vietnam has been publicly accepted that it was completely based on bullshit. It was a war that we never even really had any intentions to win, and it was just a fucking money grab, you know. And never mind the drugs that were coming out of there and all that stuff. And there's, you know, and there's people who are Vietnam vets today that never had their life back, you know, that they were drafted. They never, you know, they mentally were never the same, physically were never the same because of Agent Orange and whatnot and whatever else they went through. And yet these are people we trust at this time they're telling us the truth. I mean, it's almost like the male or female who dates the abusive significant other who every time they're like, no, he's going to be good this time, or she's going to be good. She's not going to hit me this time. He's not.
I have firsthand experience with that, by the way. And it is exactly like that. It really is exactly like that. There's that whole cognitive dissonance, but it's on such a horrific scale globally. I mean, it's an entire you said the F word, so I'm gonna say it's a mind fuck.
Yeah.
And it's a psychological war against everyone, and it's been hugely successful.
Well, and
Hugely
I really think the difference is right now. I mean, you see the meme going around, like if they would have told you they're going to lock you down for a year, would have you gone along with
or
it?
forever?
You know? But what I think is they have so much of our data now. They know exactly how far they can push each time. So they've been inching this thing forward, knowing exactly each time they push forward, they can get away with this much. They can lock us down this time for this long.
Well,
they can extend it by this long.
What's happening is that they end up changing our lifestyle or remolding society in some way or another. Like, okay, make everybody wear masks. And by the time like the information that led to us accepting everybody wear masks comes out that it was not accurate or it was wrong or it wasn't as bad as we thought it was, people have accepted it and got used to it. And the next thing you know, you're like, okay, now I'm accepting this lifestyle, this way of life that was based on information that I actually already forgot what information it was that they gave me to accept this in the first place. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, so it's like, it seems like it's such a clever trick. It's like you give bad information, you just force feed us it. And then by the time we can debunk it, you know, it's almost like they say about like, you know, articles that are, you know, bad journalism or whatnot. Like by the time somebody debunks it and gets caught and says, hey, no, you lied about this. Like nobody cares. Nobody's reading the article anymore. Like everybody read the initial report that came out. And it's kind of the same thing. It's like everybody buys in. And then by the time we're like, hey, you know, like Ferguson in the UK was wrong. And he, you know, he admitted that he was wrong and nobody cares because his first predictions is what led to the lockdown in the first place. So it's a huge issue. Like this just, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it's just a lack of memory, like everybody needs alpha brain or something. You know, what is it? It's
the Lancet study. You just told the Lancet study too. The Lancet study on hydroxychloroquine. You know, they released this study that, you know, debunks it, and everybody goes, "Oh, see, hydroxychloroquine was bad, right?" And then 2 weeks later they retract it, which never ever happens. But the damage is already done at that point. Yep. They're not using the drug anymore.
Dr. Seralini, the French scientist who did one of the real famous GMO pesticide studies and found that, you know, there's some negative effects in rats or whatnot. He got it published, no problems. All of a sudden, they just pulled it, and he fought it. And then eventually they're like, okay, you're right. You know, we didn't have any real reason or justification to pull your study. And by then everybody's like, oh yeah, that GMO study's been debunked. You know, it was told, you know. So, I mean, it's the same thing with the Wakefield thing. I mean, look at Dr. Wakefield. I mean, most people just know that, oh, he had his license taken away, but no, you don't. I mean, this is the thing is what's frustrating with so many of the topics we talk about is that the people who are most likely to argue with it are the people who are less likely to actually look it up. Like you, like 2 seconds into the conversation, you're like, you try to like control yourself. But I just like so many times I'm in a conversation with somebody and I just want to be like, you have spent zero time looking this up. You have no fucking idea what you're talking about. Like literally no idea what you're like. You haven't. I mean, we can all reference things and it's like, what about this or what? And it's like, they're just arguing with you, but not with any real information and no real way of debunking what you're saying because they're not even aware of what you're saying. And so often, like so much of this becomes a pissing contest where just like, people just want to, you're either like, which is crazy. Like I was going to use the term like that you want to be a conspiracy theorist, like, and you're in that, you know, team, or you're a skeptic. But like skeptic has been stolen from us because we're the real skeptics. Like when you think about it, like what we call a somebody who's a skeptic, you know, today, usually it's somebody who is trying to debunk conspiracy theories. And I'm like, well, that's not really what a skeptic is. Cause I'm skeptic. I'm very skeptical of everything. And that's what leads me down these rabbit holes is me being skeptical. So why does he get to use that word? And why don't we get to we should be the skeptics. I mean, instead of conspiracy theorists, we should take back the word skeptic.
I agree.
Well, we need to take back debunked while we're at it too, because they tagged that with Andy Wakefield when like that was, you couldn't bring up autism and vaccines and go, it's been debunked. Right. And they'd just say, they'd look at Andy Wakefield. Like that was their whole argument, having never looked into it. Exactly.
Yeah. That's a very effective strategy. Like anything that they want to attack us on, they can automatically just say it's been debunked. automatically without backing it up with anything. This is a very common strategy. And Charlie talks about that a lot.
You could now just about everything we talk about has been debunked in the eyes of a typical person who doesn't really do any deep dives into these topics or know where to do deep dives. Because even if somebody does want to give you the benefit of the doubt of researching things you've talked about, they can't find that information. And that's a huge issue. That's why when we did that Union of Unwanted with the Odyssey guys, Jeremy from Odyssey and Float and Rockfin and whatnot, which congratulations, you guys are on there. It's awesome.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it's pretty rad.
Yeah, when you coming over?
Yeah.
I know. I feel like it's the cult that I'm like fighting not to go in. I'm like, no, take my wife, but don't take me.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I do feel like I'm going to eventually give in just because they're really good at doing what I suck at. And that's monetizing, so it is like I could, but the thing is, again, like I've said this on the show so often, like these conversations are so important to me that I don't want to put them behind any paywall. I don't want to make it hard for people to get it, but I do understand, like if I could financially get help, I can put more of these out there, so I can, it's kind of, I see things from both perspectives, and it's kind of an internal dilemma that I'm constantly having. Because I do like a little fun, like an additional show. Like that's kind of the direction I was thinking. Like Truthzilla, we don't want any of our interviews, any of our like fun little bonus episodes. We want that available for everybody at all times, open source. Do what you want, enjoy it, right? But doing a little above and beyond. Actually, like we go on an adventure, like film it, or like just just something. You're doing a series on there, right?
I don't know. Well, so I had this because I was reading this article about how they're gonna do.
It sounds like you're having second thoughts about.
No, it's great. No. Okay. It's hilarious.
Explain it.
No, it's just funny because I was reading this article about how they, like, after Biden gets into office, they're going to have truth and reconciliation committees for all the Trump supporters and put us up on tribunals and bring us to justice. And so I was like, oh, that's a great name. So called it the Truthzilla Reconciliation Commission, right? And so there we go. So anyway, just going to be a fun little thing. I don't know. We're just going to do fun stuff with it, and it's less about it's just gonna be fun. So anyway.
Yeah. And speaking of that, I mean, we've made almost nothing with this, and this is not about the money.
No, that's it.
At the same time, it would be nice to at least break even, right? And like make this thing keep going. I mean, the goal is always to just get the information out there, get those conversations going. Certainly. But I like Rockfin. Yeah. And the nice thing about Rockfin is, all the people we really like are on there. So we're just in the group with our friends, so it just makes sense. But
I was dragging my feet on Rockfin pretty hard. Like those photos where it's like the dog getting pulled into the vet and they're like, their paws are all the way forward and their neck's being jerked off with the leash. And they were like being so cool about it for a long time. And I was just like, I just didn't want to do it. And finally I was like, all right, let's do it. And now everything's flowing much more nicely, but you can't swim against the current too hard, I guess.
No.
Anyways.
Have you guys started releasing anything on there yet? Where you have your oh, okay. You did.
Yeah. We uploaded about like the last 2 months worth of episodes. Like we didn't go, I don't know. But then yes, all of our recent episodes are on there. And then there's like 3 premium ones up there, just quick little, one-offs. Like we'll just like get together like on a Zoom call, just like this, and be like, hey, you guys want to do a Zoom call real quick? Boom, boom. Just, it's kind of just like kind of spontaneous, and then put that up as premium. You know what I mean? It's cool. It's a good deal.
There's enough crazy things happening in the world right now where you can have a conversation twice a day that you could just throw up, right?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I like the idea that they're kind of taking in all these people that are looking for homes and helping them monetize and whatnot. I do like that. My only concern is always, like I said, like spread the stuff as far and wide as possible. Union of Unwanted, it's the same thing. I remember when we talked about making it its own thing. I was the one who resisted a little bit, and I'm just like, listen, I don't care what we do. I want to keep it a community. I want to keep it open and available. I want people who participate. Like, even if I don't share it on my RSS feed anymore, the hosts don't share it on their RSS feed anymore, I want the participants to do that. I want them to be able to, because what happens is, like, for example, Dr. Judy, when she was on Monday, everybody is sharing it. So you guys shared it. It ended up being on my YouTube channel because I ended up streaming it. But it wasn't on my RSS feed, but I saw it pop up on my RSS or on my podcast app because you guys shared it, and whoever else, Monica or whoever else was sharing it. So everybody was uploading it, and then they're putting it on their YouTube channels also, and Odyssey channels and whatnot. I know Tim, the Liberty Advisor, had it on his Odyssey channel and whatnot. So it's cool because we're all helping spread these conversations.
Exactly.
And when they're that important, and we're doing, we're gathering that many people, I feel like it helps. It helps having those big groups because everybody does have the ability to share it afterwards. It's if Dr. Judy did a interview just with me or just with you or just with Sam or whoever, yeah, it'll get some attention, but now times that by 5 or 10, everybody's sharing it. It's much easier to get that information out there. So to me, that was super important. I'm the same way. Monetizing was never a priority. Probably wasn't a priority for too long. Because even the podcast host website I use, Podomatic, they can get a little expensive once you get to like unlimited storage and bandwidth. Once that's necessary, it gets a little pricey. They're awesome though. I will say, like, anytime I've had an issue, when I had an issue with iTunes with the Del Bigtree episode in the height of the lockdown, and when I had a issue with iTunes with Mickey Willis episode, they were really attempting to, unfortunately they couldn't do much because iTunes was giving them bullshit technical issues. And I'm like, and I was telling Podomatic, I'm like, hey, FYI, just giving you a heads up, they're probably lying to you. I'm like, more than likely because of who the guest is, and with Del Bigtree, he had the same issue when he was on Grimerica, with actually they did a Swapcast Grimerica and the Conspiracy Farm. I don't know if you guys saw that episode, but it's a really good episode. It was with somebody who's friends with Pat Miletich, and he was supposed to be the pro-vaccine person, and then Del was going to be the
I want to listen so bad.
And it was a debate, and the best part about the debate that it turned into the pro-vaccine person saying, yeah, you're right, Del, these studies should be done, and they are super easy. Why haven't we done them? And so it wasn't much of a debate, and it was actually a really pleasant conversation. But I know that Grimerica said that they had issues with that show afterwards, or I don't know if it was iTunes or whatnot. But I like what they're doing too. Like Grimerica, they're always like ahead of the curves with like no agenda in regards to doing your own servers and doing their own thing. I think that probably is eventually what we need to do. But the hard thing is, how are we going to find everybody's show? It's like, if we're it's to have some type of foot on these like mainstream platforms for as long as we can, I think is a good idea. Like I'm not going to leave YouTube until they kick me off. I'll keep posting stuff. We talked about what the title of the last Union of the Unwanted was going to be when we posted it on YouTube, and I'm like, it's on my YouTube channel. I'm gonna put that it's Dr. Judy. I'm like, I don't give a shit. I'm like, if I get kicked off, I get kicked off. It is what it is. But so I'm gonna stay on there and use the platform. Hopefully, I know we're probably all shadow banned, but hopefully somebody who isn't aware of it will run into it. And I'm gonna keep posting on Facebook and Twitter and all those spots until I get kicked off. And these alternative platforms are awesome. And one thing I really like, and the only difference why I'm a little bit more supportive of like Float and Odyssey compared to Rockfin is because Rockfin, Jamie's awesome and Rockfin's awesome, but I do have a sense of like they care more about like, okay, we're making a cool platform. They're not really passionate about maybe all the issues we're passionate about.
True.
Where Odyssey, when you hear Jeremy, when he was on the Union of the Unwanted, or when he did a great interview with James Corbett, and he talked about how he came up with the idea and whatnot. And I think I shared it on our Union of the Unwanted Telegram messenger. But that interview was awesome because you're like, this person actually cares about these issues. And same thing with Float. Aaron and Kingsley, they are libertarians. They're passionate about no censorship, freedom of speech. So it's a different feel, because it's like, okay, these people are creating a platform because they care about these issues. And Rockfin seems like they're creating a platform because it happens that maybe financially it's a good little a good little niche to have, that like, hey, well, we're not going to censor anybody. You guys can come on. I'm not really big into the alternative media world, but I will support you guys because, hey, you come to our platform. If you're on our platform, we'll support you regardless what you're doing, so
Well, I agree with you, but I also want to say that if you were to look at Rockfin right now, like a big portion of their content is creators like us.
Oh, absolutely.
So they kind of have no choice but to support our issues in that regard, right? Because we're supporting them. So and I 100% agree with you, but we've kind of taken the approach, and I think what you're saying is just spread it everywhere. We're on Odyssey and all that stuff as well.
The only problem I've been having with Odyssey is I can't seem to, so we're on there, but I can't seem to get, when we upload to, I guess maybe I can upload directly to Odyssey. That's my problem. But like you know how it scrapes from YouTube, right? But I can't, any of our episodes are over an hour, it seems, don't make the transition over, which is interesting.
Has it something to do with maybe having to verify the account or something like that?
Oh, okay. Something like that. Okay. I'll look into it.
Yeah. Sometimes that's a problem. If you need Jeremy's email, let me know, because I'll contact him directly and he'll help you out. And because I feel like somebody else said the same thing, that's not the first time I heard somebody had a similar problem, and I think it had something to do with verifying the account or whatnot. Okay. But I mean that's where people are going to get their information. The more and more people who are going to Odyssey and I mean Float's not really a video platform, or BitChute or whatnot. I think though you can get much more interesting information there than you can on YouTube. Like we've said on so many of these shows. I mean, YouTube's going to be cooking videos and cat videos and how-to videos and who's that little rich Asian kid who just plays with toys, whatever his name is, Ryan. Oh, it's going to be
Ryan
something.
Yeah, I think it's Ryan. Yeah,
Ryan. Yeah, my kids love him.
Yeah, I'm just like, wow, I feel poor when I watch these videos. But
these people are multimillionaires for opening boxes, dude. It doesn't make any sense. Like maybe America does deserve to fall. I don't know.
Isn't that a little frustrating, right? You guys put so much heart and soul, because I know like throughout the years that I've always had this feeling of like, wow, this interview was so important, and I feel like I'm doing something fulfilling and important for the universe. Then you put it out there and you're like waiting for something to happen. Like nothing happened. Like nobody cares, apparently, which goes into a quick story about Dr. Brzezinski. When I had him on, my podcast was real small. I mean, he was one of the first guests that came on within I don't know if it was the first 6 months or year or whatnot. So it was like either late 2013, early 2014, something like that. And when I had Dr. Brzezinski on, I was a big fan of his. If you guys aren't familiar with that movie, Brzezinski, The Business Behind Cancer, something along those lines, was a name of the film. Amazing film. So it was one of my favorite documentaries. And really, I mean, it will pull at your heartstrings. It's a really emotional documentary. This guy was a medical genius, Polish immigrant, got his PhD super young. I don't know if he was like in his early 20s or mid 20s, something like that. And then all of a sudden he went from like being considered a genius to pseudoscience. Once he came up, he found this thing called anti-neoplastones, which was having some cancer benefits in regards to fighting and treating it. And so he has an amazing battle or whatnot with him. So I get him on the show, and in his documentary, he talks about how pharmaceuticals and other people have these paid trolls to go just discredit everything that he does and call him pseudoscience and say that, again, the debunking word, saying that his information's been debunked and his treatment's been debunked or whatnot. And I knew firsthand because I had him on my show. I had him scheduled. I was really excited. I think I tweeted it or put it on Facebook, wherever I was on social media. And immediately, even though my show was very small, very, the listenership was very little, I never got so much attention in my life. All of a sudden, all these fake accounts were just tweeting at me and writing comments and saying, "Don't have him on. He kills people. He's a murderer." All this stuff, and I'm like, well, first of all, his treatment isn't FDA approved because the FDA wouldn't let him approve it. And
go figure.
Yeah, go figure. So so they went after him and they just kept bringing him to court or whatnot. But he because of that, I mean, first of all, what's crazy about his story is that one of the local news stations were doing a story on him going to court with the FDA, and the people outside picketing were like the jury for the last time he was in court. Like they're like, well, we didn't know anything about him, but after we heard the story, we were so passionate that we came out here and picketed for him. And they really had no way of proving he did anything illegal. They just basically kept suing him, hoping he ran out of money. And luckily there were some people who lives were saved because of him that have been contributing and helped out or whatnot. Because it's not FDA approved, you can only go to him if you're terminally ill. So in other words, if you have like zero other options, and then you can legally use some experimental treatment. So he was only getting people that were like the worst of the worst, like they're already at the end of the line, zero options, and he saved many of those people's lives. So, if you're one of those people, of course you're going to be passionate. You're going to contribute any way you can. But amazing documentary, which also got pulled off Amazon Prime. Same like Vax, the Del Bigtree documentary, which he had a agreement with Amazon that it would never be pulled, and it was going to be on there forever, and then it gets pulled. Another great documentary, I think it was called The Big Secret. Dr. Susan, I forget what her last name is. It was a great documentary about the history of medicine that gets pulled. I remember when I had them on, I think it was right around the time that it got pulled. I'll send you their contact information. And anybody else that's been on the show that you guys ever want to have on, let me know. I'll send it out there. I'll help out any way I can. Please. And
all right.
But yeah, they were awesome. Their video, because it really got into the history of it, how we got to where we are now in regards to like medicine only being chemical based, like the only thing we consider now medicine, and I'm sure you guys know the history of it, but a lot of people don't know how that happened, like that, root extracts, dietary, using a dietary method to treat things and whatnot. Those were all acceptable methods for a long time until, obviously petroleum, which is used in a lot of this and whatnot, and Rockefellers. And I know James Corbett did a great little video called Rockefeller Medicine back in the day, which was really good, went into the history of this. And also another great short documentary. So I always say his name wrong. I think it's Snyder. Yeah. Have you guys seen Conspiracy Synergy? His podcast?
I've dived a little bit into it. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
He has, I think it's a fairly new episode where he goes into the whole rabbit hole and the whole history of medicine too. And he does some really good research. He's another guy who's really interesting. If you guys ever want to have him on, super nice dude. I think you might've been on a,
we were on the Union with him a couple once or twice, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a quiet dude, so it's he doesn't say too much, but he's awesome, super nice. The shirt I was wearing Monday at the Union of the Unwanted is one of his shirts. It's a COVID shirt. I don't know if you've seen it has like this doctor and it says COVID 1984 or whatnot, but he was sending them out to people. He's like, if anybody wants one, he's like, let me know. I'll send them out for free, and he's cool. He's like, I just want to support you guys. So maybe I'll give him your email and I'll help. But yeah, I mean, there's this whole suppression of like the history of medicine is super interesting, because obviously there's something there they don't want you to know. And it's not always the case in regards to like not every time something gets suppressed, it's because there's some juicy information they don't want you to know. But in many cases, I think from my history of looking things up, it seems like it's typically the case. Like it's typically the case that, hey, you know what? If they're suppressing this, if they're taking this documentary off Amazon Prime, if they're not letting me read this article or hear this researcher, there might be a reason for it. Maybe they're getting too close to the truth.
Well, it's not in their best interest to help people to be well. Pharmaceuticals don't heal people. It's absolutely a business, and it's a propagandized business. And they benefit most when we're sick and when we're dying and when we're relying on them to extend our lives, though they won't have much quality to them. And vitamin therapy, treatment through healing foods, things that are actually, meant to be consumed by human beings, sunlight, exercise, all of those things. You notice that only real healers talk about those things. Everyone else, and I say this too, I always want to add the caveat. I feel like I need to, that, there are some doctors out there, there are surgeons, there are great, bone doctors, there are, people have real injuries that they need help with. But in terms of the human body being well, that's incumbent upon each individual human to do their due diligence to make sure that they're strong and able to function in their brain and in their body. And part of that is being aware of what it is that you're exposing yourself to and what you're putting inside of your body. And I realize that society isn't set up, like with anything else, to make that be easily accessible for us to figure out how to do. And further, the more they shove us into apartment buildings and cities, it's less intuitive for us to grow our own food and to be, out with our feet in the dirt and all of those things. But that is the way. And, I want to go back to what you said about how you put out something that, you think, like an hour and a half in, oh my gosh, I hope everyone tunes in for that part because it was so impactful, but really, and the part that keeps, I get discouraged a lot doing this, not this sitting at the table with my best friends, but, just being out there and being such a strong vocal advocate for, freedom and anti-censorship and, future for my kids and, my neighbors' kids, all of ours, is that, shoot. I start to go down the wrong rabbit hole.
You're right there.
I was about planting the seeds.
Yeah.
Because the day that we plant the seed is not the day we eat the fruit. Mm-hmm. And that is what continues to give me hope and continues to propel me forward. And I see that, I might get discouraged, week A, B, or C. And the next week I see that, staying the course and keeping true to what is true and keeping true to my inner voice to keep speaking out on these things. There's like this blessing that happens next week. Like, okay, if I had stopped then when I was so discouraged, if I had let that person derail me all the way, this wouldn't have happened. And so I feel like doors are opening and the path is clear. Sorry, Scott's playing with the camera. So you were doing this for a minute. Anyways, it does encourage me. I'm taking the mouse.
Okay. No, I'm sorry.
Anyway, but we keep planting the seeds because the fruit will come and those that are meant to partake of it will be there to receive it. So I feel 100% confident on saying that. And I think that that's true. And seeing what all of us in this community do in terms of putting this information out, getting conversations started, uniting with one another, we're all doing different things in our community and our lives within our families on these platforms. And it's all for a purpose of light. It's all for bringing the truth in front of everyone's eyes who it's been hidden from, and the truth won't be hidden. So in that I have confidence.
And I think we're in a difficult time because everything is so polarized that it's hard for people to get out of their own echo chamber. But at the same time, I can look back and go, I wasn't awake to most of the things that I'm awake to today at one point. So the deal is, though, I find is that people have to they have to discover a lot of this stuff themselves. So the best you can do is plant a seed and then they go find that documentary, right? And they go find it themselves, and they go watch it and the light bulb goes off for themselves while they're researching. Like that has, I think you can't just tell people like, oh, this is how it is. For one, like, you try to tell them like about like COVID and stuff like that. Well, you can't really tell them just about COVID without, talking about Event 201, but then you got to explain, Bill Gates, Bill Gates, you got to explain Agenda 21. You got to tell them about the Great Reset. You got to tell them Klaus Schwab and, the books he's written on, the Fourth Industrial Revolution and this and that,
New World Order.
There's so many pieces to this thing that to us, it's just second nature, so people, they'll find their way in, but if you can kind of just give them a little something. So it's hard to not lose faith in humanity to some extent because everything's so polarized, but at the same time, plant the seeds.
I think it's over, man. I think it's over. I think if you're not already here, then it's probably too late for you.
I think go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, man, like I'm at the point now where if you're not on this train already, and if you're not at least, curious or thinking or questioning even the slightest bit, it's probably too late. And when we have to not focus any more energy, like I've been saying this a lot lately, like maybe I shouldn't put it like that because we're still going to do this. And we're still hope that maybe we can reach a few more people.
To fight for the ones that are fighting so hard against us, with that personal individual person that's like headbutting us. And we're like, I'm trying to save you. Like you're jumping off a cliff. And like, if you want to let go of my hand, at some point I have to let go.
But that's what's happening is that we're being bogged down in this little thing. We're just been arguing for months and months about mask or no mask. It's like, dude, I can't have this discussion anymore. Like you're done. I'm done with you. We started this thing and I really
watch Plandemic and go from there. Yes, that's what I tell people. I'm like, listen, if you I'm like, it's an hour and 24 minutes. I've seen it like 8 or 9 times. I have people come over like, you haven't seen Plandemic Indoctrination. Come over. I'll cook you food.
Which by the way,
come over and be awakened at my house. But it's such a big deal. Yeah. So, but the whole thing too, go ahead. I'm sorry. I was going to finish.
I was going to go here for just a minute here. So I was going to say basically just like, so at this point where we started this project with the interest of, you know, awakening and enlightening as many people, like planting seeds. That's our little slogan on all our pages, like planting seeds of truth in the hearts and minds of those who seek it. Right. That's kind of the idea. But at this point, it's, you know, it's been, you know, an awakening for myself as well. And I think at this point, we're trying to empower people. We've been talking a lot on our show with people about solutions. Like what is the solution to this? How do we get out of this? Is there a way out of this?
Or through it and around it.
And we have been taking action. Like we've been taking some very serious, like immediate action, you know, in our community. Like we've been going to, you know, rallies, which it'd be one.
I was red pilled on a rally, by the way.
Yeah,
I'm still getting red pilled.
She did awesome but anyway, the whole point of that too is like, you know, we started a freedom cell here in our community too. I don't know if you're familiar with the Freedom Cells movement, freedomcells.org, Derek Bros and John Bush. It's like, you know, it's,
I think he was just interviewed on Corbett too, I think.
Okay. Right? Yeah. I know that him and Corbett have I think, they did do a big thing. So anyway, we started our own, we got our own little Telegram chat. We had our first meetup last weekend. We had about 30 people show up.
Wow. Yeah. It was really powerful.
At a business, at a restaurant, like the only restaurant in our whole community that's staying open and saying, fuck you to the governor. So
$8,500 a day.
Yeah,
they were giving her $500 a day, but when that didn't stop her, they upped it to $8,500.
So all you out there, go along came Trudy's in Springfield. Go support them, dude. But anyway,
amazing.
But anyway, so they opened.
The problem with three hosts is we all have something to say right now.
Well, I know I'm just getting this out. And so I'm just like, you know, that's where I'm at right now. Like I'm done focusing energy on the people that are lost, you know, and I want to focus this energy on building this community of people that we found from all walks of life. And it's just been the most empowering, awesome thing ever. And like all these people that showed up, like all different, you know, we had like, you know, hardcore patriots and very, you know, people that are just completely like, no more the state solution. Like we're not going to use the state to fix the state. Like we're done. Bitcoin enthusiasts, just everything, man. It's been such an empowering thing. And I really, if anybody listening, you know, if you're looking for solutions, like maybe go to freedomcells.org and look for one in your community and try and get plugged in or start one. And that's what we did. And it's just been pretty awesome. Man.
I think that's been the most other than us putting information out, but in terms of making concrete movements within our own lives, for our families, for each other, and for a group of people who are like-minded, that has been hugely beneficial. And I don't think that we would be anywhere in terms of preparedness or what we need to do, our goals for the future and our plans, if we didn't have, for me, at least if we didn't have those freedom cells to connect with these like-minded people.
And then leading up to this, so like I said, this is our first one, but we've been going up to the ones up in Portland. Like that's how we met Adam from Deborah Gets Red Pilled, is he was a listener and he reached out to us and he basically said, hey, you know, you guys want to you should check out the Freedom Cells thing. And we ended up, you know, and then eventually, you know, you've heard his story, how he started his, you know, Deborah Gets Red Pilled, the epic podcast, Deborah Gets Red Pilled. And then we started going up to their Freedom Cell meetups.
That's how we met Howard Lichtman.
And that's how we met Howard Lichtman from Thick Red Line, who, you know, we're talking to getting on too. I know he was on Corbett not too long ago too. But anyway, so that's what's been keeping us busy here. So.
And I just, to jump in, since I'm taking...
You're good.
But I think that's been one of the great things about what has happened is we have networked, and it's been the union, and it's been all the podcasts of we've networked across the world, right? We've networked with like-minded people and just, you know, bounced ideas off each other, and you know, we're getting through this thing together, right? Yeah. And I really feel like, you know, alone no one can do this, but at the same time, the power of being in a room of unmasked people that are like-minded in your own communities cannot be understated enough. Like, and all people that are talking about, okay, who can grow food? Okay. You know, who's good at canning? Who's got firearm safety covered?
You guys all having
who's good at reloading, right? Like we're looking at all these things very seriously.
Teachers, healers, psychologists.
Because we don't know. We know, I think I have a pretty good idea where they want this thing to go. We don't know how far it's going to go
or how quickly. I think we know where it's going, but how quickly, that's the big what if, you know.
But I did want to tell a story though, just because it was hilarious being in this meetup, because like we started and we have some real patriots like there, like Scott said, and they want to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, right? Which
I think is awesome. I missed that. I was late. I'm always late.
You know, I'm probably not so much into that myself, especially given current events.
You were just like, eh. Yeah, I wish I wasn't there.
But anyway, so they have to go grab the American flag out of the room that's locked. And so she opens the door to the other. She sets the alarm off on this place. And this is all like 30 people, unmasked in, against the governor's orders
in a restaurant that's already targeted
with the blinds down and the alarms going off. It was hilarious. It was like we're part of like a movement, from the past, like we're having this secret meeting,
Total secret society, dude.
It was peeking through the blinds when new people came just to make sure they were there for the Freedom Cell
hilarious.
meeting.
But I mean, we obviously they didn't come, but at the same time, I don't think Springfield police would have done anything.
No,
but
they're kind
of on the level.
Not to get too much on that. Like Adam came on our show a couple weeks ago and like red pilled us on the whole cop thing. Like, yeah.
Well, that's what got me. Yeah. Like, going to the rally one and then we were talking to Adam, which just kind of further solidified it. But yeah, so I'm still like reeling from like emotional trauma from my red pilling. But
when the oppression of the New World Order comes, it's going to be in a police uniform. Like that's what it's.
It's already here.
It's already here, man.
Yeah.
It's
it's funny because in where I live, in Massachusetts in general, they mandated masks anywhere in public, and I know it. Do they need more evidence? That's not about science or the virus anymore. I mean, if you're by yourself, if you're hiking, you need a mask. I mean, it's ridiculous. When 9 months ago you didn't need one, and then a little bit after that you needed one if you were within 6 feet of people, and now you need one if you're taking a shower. It's ridiculous. But so the thing is, the police when they were texting people, everybody got a voicemail, everybody got a text message, everybody in the state of Massachusetts, hey, these are new guidelines, this and that, it was pretty crazy. So I remember telling my wife, I'm like, there's no fucking way that people are going to be wearing them in public by themselves. And I overestimated the intelligence of a lot of people in America because there was immediately, and I think a little bit was fear of getting in trouble. Because my wife's like, I don't think, she's like, but what if you get in trouble? I'm like, who the fuck's going to get you in trouble? You think the cops are for Biden? You think the cops are for these lockdowns? I'm like, a lot of my cop buddies, they're first responders. I mean, they're going to people who are sick. They're going to the hospital. They're talking to, people who work on ambulances, people who are firefighters, whatever. So they all talk among themselves and they know this isn't as serious as they're telling us. And unless, you're going to a hospital, which most people weren't, you see that they're not as busy as they're telling you it is and whatnot. So it was a positive thing, I think, the fact that they made it a guideline. They told everybody. A big percentage of people didn't do it. Some did, but a big percentage of people didn't do it. And it was never enforced. So little by little, people stopped doing it. And it was kind of like, in high school or whatever, middle school, when you see somebody doing something, you're like, oh, they can get away with it. Let me do it. It's like, you just need somebody who has the balls to do it. And then once you see, oh, they're doing it, they're not getting in trouble. So let me do it. And that's what we need to do. It's small little things like that. But it was I think a positive thing. The fact that the police weren't enforcing it. And like we always say, like it really, it's this illusion of power. It's this illusion of control. I mean, they can't arrest us all. But it's also not a us against, like, corporations are, because I think a lot of people on the right, it's like, this is the perfect fight for them, because it's like, government's obviously the huge part of the issue, but people on the left, they should be on our team too, because they're anti-big corporations. And who else is, colluding with government to push this? It's big pharma, it's corporations. So where the fuck are people from the left who are supposed to be my body, my choice, right? All those women, like where are those my body, my choice? Like, well, fuck, now we're talking about my kids. Like, nothing is more personal than when you're talking about kids, So it's like, how about, that DC bill, which I'm sure you guys have talked about.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Which is crazy. I mean, it's insanity. This issue, I feel like, and I know that you guys talked to Grimerica. You guys did a Swapcast. I've known them for a little bit and had many conversations with them. I know that sometimes I get COVID fatigue, and a lot of people do. Yeah. And I know that there's also some resistance in regards to Trump isn't the savior. I get it. He's not. And I know that there's a lot of internal debate between okay, is he really an outsider? Is he not an outsider? I think there's enough evidence to prove that he's more of an outsider than any president we've ever had ever. And I also think that when you look at his battle with Big Pharma, when that's an issue that you guys and myself are very passionate about. I think he handled it better than we could probably ask any president, and to handle it in regards to actually pushing back a little bit with the hydroxychloroquine. I don't think any president would ever publicly say, hey, you know what, you guys want to say it's so dangerous, I'm on it, how about that, fuck you guys. I'm gonna or the fact that just any of the pushback, the fact that during a debate, and I think it's with who the hell was it one of the doctors, Dr. Carson, Dr. Carson, is there Dr. Carson who ran for president?
There was.
And there's a debate where they try to make Trump look bad, and they're like, hey, doctor, Trump thinks that vaccines could cause harmful effects, or however they worded it, to make him look like a lunatic. And Trump, like he usually does, because he's very confident in what he's going to say and in his point of views. He's like, absolutely, I think we're giving people too much. I just think that there's something there. I think that they're dangerous or whatnot. And the doctor actually agreed with him in regards to, he's like, well, I do think that maybe we're giving kids at too young of an age too many. And just the fact that even something as simple and something as it wasn't a big deal, it didn't really cause anything. But the fact that it was a little hint of like, okay, this guy's willing to have public discussions that nobody in politics would ever have. Like, he's willing to say something that there's no way any person running for president would ever even touch the topic of vaccines. And for him to even bring it up in a debate and still stick to his guns when he could have done the easy political thing of like just denied, well, that was misunderstood, or that's not really what I meant, or whatever. He stuck to his guns. So I think that there has been some evidence of, and the way he talked about the TPP and all that stuff. He is the first president in forever, not to say that he ended any wars, but he's the first one to not start a war, as president, which is the first time that's happened in a long time. So I think there's some evidence of it. He's not the savior. Is there flaws? Absolutely. I mean, if Whitney Webb was here, she'd be going down the, whole list of things. I just think that he's, in regards to specifically just Big Pharma, and I know that the whole warp speed thing, I get it, that is obviously an issue that a lot of people are a little torn in between. But I can't deny that when I went to the Rally for Our Rights thing that Brian Fessa put together, that whole protest down in Connecticut, when I went down there, I'm there because I'm for vaccine choice and vaccine information. And it just happens that the same people who are holding the vaccine signs are the same people holding Trump signs and don't tread on me signs. So the way I look at it is like, okay, we can disagree maybe on Trump. We can disagree on a bunch of different things, but we're fighting for the same thing. We're on the same fucking team. So you guys are friends of mine, so, I have no shame in saying that, like, yeah, I mean, I might not be a Trump supporter, but I support Trump supporters because they support me on a lot of the same issues. So, and there is this issue with nationalism, like you see the American flag, a lot of people are waving it. I was one of those people. And I still kind of am. I'm not a big fan of, doing the whole Pledge of Allegiance, because I'm not pledging allegiance to anybody. I want to think for myself. Yeah. I want to be open to disagree with things and whatnot. But I'm trying to catch myself from saying whatnot, because I just read a comment about, I love Ricky, but he has to stop saying whatnot. But
mine is dude. Mine is dude. Apparently I say dude all the time. That's fine.
That's like one of our biggest mistakes, is like reading comments. But every once in a while you're like, you know what? Let me just see what people are saying. And for the most part, people are very kind. So I can't complain. And for the most part, for listeners, guess what, guys, listening, we know we say this shit too often. Like you're not totally, the reason why people like Megan and myself have anxiety is because we're going through our head saying like, don't say whatnot today. Don't say whatnot.
It's exactly true. It's so true.
So I just got a comment, and I mean, obviously, I think we've all been on the same side on most of these issues. And I think for that reason, like, I mean, there was no doubt where we were on the side of the presidency going forward. Like, there was no doubt. But at the same time, I do question, and I don't have this answer, but it almost looks like this huge psyop. I mean, you look at what just happened on the 6th here, that like they've funneled everyone who is a Trump supporter into this box, right? And now the boot is coming down of censorship on anyone who had any relation to Trump, right? Like, we're all QAnon now, right? And we've been seeing this play out over like the whole year.
it kind of made the argument that everybody's been saying the whole time that Trump is not the elite. He's not a part of the establishment, which he obviously wasn't, because he wasn't a politician before he ran for president. He has a history of politics besides paying them off. So he knows how dirty it is. So, and then the way this all ended or is ending, I think is very interesting, because I feel like if I was one of those people trying to convince people that, like, no, he isn't these guys. He's not just a typical Republican, Democrat, whatnot. I said it again. Whatnot. I got to stop. But he the fact that Fox News, the Republican Party, nobody has his back. Everybody turned on him. What does that tell you? That he was never really in the club. Even when they picked. I try to remind people.
Unless he's just a pawn.
When he ran for president, the Republicans didn't want him to be the choice. They basically are just like, listen, we can't fight this anymore. Apparently he has way more backing than any of us. So we're going to back him for our future. And that's kind of what happened. The party didn't want him. The only reason they were okay with backing him after he became president, or when it was obvious that he was going to be the choice, was the fact that they knew that he had the popularity, that people liked him. He had much more popularity than anybody else that would have ran for the Republican Party. So for their career, they're like, hey, now let me endorse him because it can get me a job. He can help me out after he has that power. And the second that power is gone, the second it's obvious that he doesn't have anything else to give you for your career, they're like, fuck you. And Fox News turned on him. All the Republicans turned on him. I mean, this is impeachment thing. I mean, this is fucking ridiculous. The fact that this guy is going to be out of office in no time, like he's at a week or whatever he has in office, and you're going to impeach him. The reason you're impeaching him is because you don't want him to run again. And you're afraid that he might actually run again. And this would prevent him from actually running again if he got impeached. So, I mean, and the thing is, this riot thing, this protest thing is so fucking frustrating, because
totally
the same fucking people that are acting like the storming of, the building is the worst thing that's ever happened in America were the same people.
The new Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, which, don't get me wrong, I'm not endorsing either one. I just think people should be right down the middle, be consistent. The same people who are making a big deal about this were the same people saying, like, it was completely okay to burn down buildings and burn down businesses and do all this shit. Well, guess what? If we go into the fucking, a building that taxpayers pay for, and it's our money that built that shit, and there's our people who work for us are in there, that makes much more sense to kind of bash that place than it does to burn down a fucking business that's barely staying open during a lockdown that has put ridiculous restrictions and really prevented you from making any profit. So it's insane that people don't see how hypocritical it is that they're doing this. That the same people are bashing these protests. To me, I'm for all protests as long as they're peaceful. You don't hurt anybody. The ones in Hartford were pretty damn peaceful. The only confrontation I saw was actually when some Black Lives Matter protesters were there, and they got at it with somebody else. Apparently, she spit on them or whatever. But for the most part, it was pretty peaceful. If one out of 1,000 people are shitheads, and you get that many thousands and thousands and possibly millions of people in DC, you're gonna have some shitheads. And there's groupthink. There's that's like a whole psychology that goes into being in a crowd and being so caught up in the energy of the crowd that if one person does something just out of reaction, you might just go ahead and do it because of the energy of the crowd, not because. And of course, there's agent provocateurs. Like,
that's
of course,
certainly.
That's what I was gonna say. Is like they had the script written already. Like, all the news agencies, all the politicians already had their script. Oh, this is the worst thing to happen since Pearl Harbor. Oh my God, this is this generation's 9/11. They had that script written already, and then they had the agent provocateurs in there to try and kick it off, anticipating that all the patriots would jump in line and just tear the whole place apart and start, dragging politicians out into the streets, right? But
a building that they own, by the way.
That didn't happen. They got like a small, very teeny tiny percentage. Like most of them, from what I hear, they're actually like fighting back, and like the people that were causing, they're like, hey, bro, chill the fuck out, or like Antifa, get out of here. You know what I mean?
Alex Jones was apparently standing on stuff, telling people don't go in the building. I mean, he probably knew how they were going to spin it, And COINTELPRO is real. I mean, these things, like, it's not out of the realm of possibility that if, and first of all, they've been planning this forever. So if you're on the left or you're a Democrat or you're the Democratic Party, and you want to strategize, how do we make the president look bad, or how do we justify a impeachment? I mean, this is the same party that spent tons of taxpayers' money looking for some link between Russia and the fact that they influenced our election and came up with nothing. And still, and TYT, oh my God, don't even fucking get me started about TYT. I mean, the Young Turks, when Cenk first started the Young Turks, I'm like, oh, this guy's passionate. I don't agree with him politically on everything. I had Dave Rubin on my show when he was still on the Young Turks. I had Jimmy Dore, I believe, when he was still on the Young Turks back in the day. And yeah, I'm like, yeah, there's people I like on there. I mean, at the time, Dave Rubin wasn't very political anyways. He was kind of just covered the news and whatnot. But to see to the extreme that they've gotten in regards to being just basically the mainstream media, I'm on their email list. So I stay on there because I would like to see how often, how many times a day they ask for money. They're constantly asking for fucking money. And it's crazy that the way they turn on Jimmy Dore, it's crazy how they're just shills. Like they were pushing the Russiagate thing the whole time. This is supposed to be a alternative media. I mean, it's ridiculous. And these people, and that's the thing, like every movement, you have to be wary. I know even people in the libertarian movement are like, it's become political. It's become too political. It's not about the ideology and whatnot. And even ideology can be poison, right? I mean, Daniele Bignelli, when he was last on my show, I don't know if you guys heard it, but he talked about how basically like anything that's an ideologies in general are a mental disorder. It's an issue. It's not, because it means you're buying into something and you're not critically thinking, so that's why I try to stay open, and I try to say, and that's something I wanted to ask you guys probably an hour and a half ago until we went completely off the rails. But we, I was going to ask you guys, this whole journey, we say this all the time doing podcasts, it's a journey. But personally, I truly feel like it is, because as I explore new topics, as I have guests on even that are knowledgeable in topics I already are informed about, but I'm exploring them deeper and asking questions and bouncing ideas off one another, I'm constantly growing. I'm learning, and I'm open to. Have you guys felt that? Because your journey has been like pretty damn quick. I mean, I know the first couple of years of my show, like the growth was real slow. You guys, like it seems like just the other day, I feel like I was talking to Scott about like how to start a podcast, and now you guys are
man,
everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's take turns on this one, right? So
yeah.
Oh, are you guys looking at me?
Okay, I'll go first, man. Yeah, man. I mean, we've met some of the most incredible people and made some amazing connections, and I have learned so much. And it's like you said, Ricky, like before I get someone on, I want to do a little research where there's some podcasts or some documentaries or read some of their articles or books or whatever it is. It's like I'm constantly learning and questioning like everything I know all the time, right? Like, and there's a lot out there. There's maybe areas where I know a little bit more, but I've certainly learned a lot in so many different areas. Like, I would say like when I got here, I really knew a bit about vaccines and the dangers of those, but I didn't know how bad our food was poisoned, how bad our water is, what all the stuff they're spraying in the air, and I've learned a lot about that, and it's just, I feel like I've got this more complete picture of what they're doing to society as a whole, and the lies that I've seen in one area kind of apply to all the different areas, right? Anywhere where there's industry and they can cut corners and get away with it and, get the regulators on the side and pay them off and have that revolving door going. It's the same trick played, everywhere. Right. And, so that's kind of been my story. I do want to say though, I want to jump back into one thing just, about the whole, what happened on the 6th, and maybe this is part of me growing and just questioning. This is that I look at what happened and I look at what happened with Trump, because I have been gone back and forth with Trump like this whole time, right? Like I have to admit, like there's been times where I'm like, dude, he is saying all the right things and I am with him. And like, there's like kind of not, and there's other times I'm like, well, why is he joining with these vaccine companies, or the big pharma? Why is he backing them and stuff? And a lot of the people I respect so much, though, have really pointed out, like, I mean, there is the Whitney Webbs and there's the Derek Bros and there's the Charlie Robinsons and there's the James Corbett's and just so many. I could go off, And I look at like what happened and I'm like, look at where we're at right now and where we started and are we better? Right. And just like overall, I feel like we got rounded up. I feel like we got rounded up and put in a trap and here you go. And now the boot is just coming down harder than it ever has. And so I don't know, but I'm certainly going to keep questioning that thing, I mean, and that's the growth of this whole thing is you question it all. Don't be stuck to any one way of, I could be wrong. I'm not stuck that I'm right on this thing, but I certainly right now the pendulum has swung to the other side. I'm like, well, we're kind of right now. It's not looking very good for anyone who questions the narrative right now. Right. Yeah. And if you question the narrative, you've been rounded up into this, you've been called QAnon and the name Trump. I said in one of our prediction episodes a couple of times ago, like, I think the name Trump is not going away with Biden becoming president. I think they're going to still be calling people Trumpers for a good 6 months after this thing,
Trumplicans
right?
or something.
Yeah,
I don't think it was ever about Trump. I think what we're seeing is just people who are disgusted with liberty. And I don't even think they understand why. For me, it was never really about the man so much as it was about the man not being, for all evidence that I had at that time, being bought and owned by the deep state. That was it for me. To me, that was very clear. And I feel that at times, I think what we're watching is theater. At times, I feel like, again, like Ed says, like with the whole him, partnering up to push this vaccine so quickly. But I also said, my critical thinking is as the sitting president of the United States of America, when we're watching the world fall to a new world order under the, this false flag of there being this, global pandemic that we need to, vaccinate everybody for. I don't see how he could have stood up, especially as much as big tech controls the narrative, as big pharma controls the narrative, and actually said, well, this is bullshit. Americans, we're not, Moderna, Pfizer, we're not working on vaccines. I don't see how he could have done that. I really don't
see. That's an important point, because sometimes I try to remind myself, I'm like, we don't live in a dictatorship where he can just bypass all of their authority and then you just basically enforce his personal views. So we have to take that in consideration.
That's kind of what I thought. And I feel like, the whole thing about them switching the narrative up, like, like the woman that was killed, in DC, but 6 hours later, we have Congress going back to work through an active crime scene. And we worked it all out, did we? Because I've watched CSI Miami and I've also done a little bit of research outside that TV show. And I know there's not that many CSI labs in the nation, much less ones that come back with results in time for Congress to go back to work the same day. The same thing with wanting people to be masked up, out of doors, or, it's like you mentioned, first it was just adults needed masks, and then we needed to mask our kids, and then only within 6 feet of each other. And now, even if we're outdoors on hiking trails, because it's a direct threat to them overthrowing us. It's like you say, the mob mentality goes both ways, for good and evil. So you might have a mob that's burning buildings down that's going to incite other people who are very low vibrational to do likewise. But if you have people who are not in DC, anyone I know that went to DC weren't there because of Trump. They were there because of liberty. Yep. They were there because of freedom. They were there because we're watching an obvious overthrow of our election. I feel like on the world stage, everyone's just watching us collapse. And I feel like we're the only nation with our head in the sand going, oh, I guess it must have not been the voting machines, it's just ridiculous. But because it's a direct, even one of us taking our mask off and walking down the street is a threat to the narrative, because it's like you say, it lets other people think, hey, if they can do it, I can do it. They do not and cannot have that. If people, people standing up for liberty, for them, they have to spin that and make it be that people who want freedom, who want sovereignty, are the evil, bad, dangerous ones, because it is for them very dangerous for people to stand for that which is a human right, a civil right, a human being's right to exist and to live and to breathe, and as Americans to pursue, our existence in the way that we seem most fitting to ourselves and our families. That's a threat to the deep state. And Donald Trump or Joe Biden or Kamala, anybody else that's ever going to come and sit in the White House, they are not the ultimate ones in control. And though for many years, I was brainwashed to think that the presidency was in 3 parts, and Congress and president and, Supreme Court and all that. But I know better now that they are the frontline puppets of the deep state agenda. Yes. Mm-hmm. And though Donald Trump might be, I think he sees the evil. I don't think that he's asleep to it. And I also think he's one man He's one dude on the world who happened to get this job. I think that he's perhaps done the best he could with the monsters he had to fight. And that's not to say that, he's, a pure person through and through, but let's be fair. Neither am I. And so when it came down to it for voting for Trump both times, to me, it was a very, very clear choice. And it wasn't because of the man. It was because of the ideal that he did or did not stand on, and the hope that I had when I'm looking at all options in front of me. Now, I mean, going forward, I don't know if I'll vote. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like there's a lot of things that have happened. There's a lot of tangents I can go off on that, but just speaking very directly to that point, I feel that he couldn't have simply stood up in the way, like, we were all ranting. We would come in here after hearing one thing and we'd be, get ready to record. And I'd be like, what the fuck is he doing? Like, how can he say that? Did you guys hear that shit today? I mean, did you guys watch it? But then I would have to go, but you know what are the chances? I mean, we saw what they did to John F. Kennedy. We've seen how they tried to take out, Reagan. What are the chances that he just go, this whole thing is a bunch of garbage. Everyone's just going to pull their masks off, and, you Democratic governors were going to just, and first and second of all, the federal government doesn't have the power to come within the states just of their own accord and take over. That's not the way that our government is set up. So I feel like that there was a lot of things at play, but I do feel, to me, it is obvious that this is an overthrow of our United States Constitution. This is an overthrow of Donald Trump. Exactly. Them trying to impeach him, them silencing him off of every platform just days before. I mean, Biden's right. They've already taken it. He's in. What are they fucking worried about? They're worried because they know that there truly are more of us who would stand for liberty. There truly are more of us that want freedom and freedom for our families and our children than that don't. And a few of us taking our masks off, a few of us marching in on DC, a few of us up, like, how we were up in Salem at our Capitol and standing up for it is very, very threatening to them. And I think that's why we're seeing, and this is where I kind of got red pilled on the police, where we're literally watching police. I'll just speak to our home state, allowing, domestic terrorists to completely pervert and destroy people's lives, their buildings, their peace of mind, trauma bonding.
I thought we were the domestic
No,
terrorists.
we're absolutely not.
Oh shit. Okay, my bad.
But there's the nicest people, a lady that I know, nicest gal in the world, on the 6th is up at the Capitol building and she's getting shot at by our Capitol Police standing there. I mean, I'm watching our Capitol Police with batons hitting people standing with flags from behind, knocking them downstairs, beating them on the ground, jumping over walls and grabbing people who are literally standing there peacefully protesting, not trying to burn down and barricade police into police stations and burn them down, not burning down businesses they like to rebuild as smart towers, any of that stuff, right? So to me, it's just so obvious. And hate is a very, very thick, low dense energy, and it is very, very hard to overcome. And the truth is, not everybody is meant to be awakened. Not everybody's going to have discernment. Not everyone's going to be saved from what's happening to all of us. And so, like, Scott was saying, sometimes you just have to be like done with certain people. And that's kind of where I'm at with it. It's not about I'm picking one person or another person. What I'm doing is I'm fighting for a future that has relevance for my children, for a life that they can thrive in and not be enslaved, for a future that I can feel safe to leave my home and go on a hiking trail without fear of persecution because I'm not fallen in line with the New World Order, because that's not going to happen. So that is people standing on righteousness, people who want truth, that always wins. It maybe doesn't win right at first, but righteousness always shines through. And even if you look at historically how, people have been oppressed in certain situations, governments have oppressed us. But when you look at the rising of what's true, when you look at redemption, it is so much more powerful than the destruction, because it has to come again. It has to rise again to the surface. And they're just hoping that that doesn't happen anytime in the beginning stages of this rollout. And they really have made it to, and I say this all the time, the liberties we've lost till now, those are gone. Those are gone now. We had someone at the Freedom Cell meeting, really staunchly advocating that, we legislate and we maybe we elect, local officials, which I think is a good idea, local officials that can be on board with us, and local police powers that will be, not enforce, sheriff that will not enforce, COVID mandates. And I'm like, this isn't about, COVID's the false flag, was the excuse to do this to us, but that we took it to this point, that we've allowed it to this point. And I say this over and over again, but I really feel as a nation where we lost so much leverage was when we allowed them to make us mask our own children. Because, and I said that before they did. I said, watch, the next thing is going to be the kids. It's going to be the kids. Because if they can get people to psychologically damage their children on the state's behalf, they've won.
And they even did that in
I lost you guys for a second.
Yeah, here we come.
Gotta back up. I knew that was gonna happen. Damn it. There we go.
They even did that in steps. So at least I don't know how they did it out there, but in Oregon, it was something like, what was it, like 12 and under, or didn't have to wear masks?
12
and
under,
then,
yeah.
And then they switched it down to 5.
So I got slung out of a store right at the beginning of that. So I'm not going to lie. My daughter was 12 at that time. And I was like, okay, well, we're not masking you. I mean, it was at the beginning of them masking children. I had to go into a sporting goods store. And to that point, I had not been wearing masks. But I went ahead and put my mask on because I thought, you know what? All right. I can't get thrown out of everywhere that I go. And I don't have the emotional energy to have these. And at the beginning of the lockdown, I was way more fired up than I am now, like, screaming matches and like people grabbing walkie-talkies and calling people. Like it was pretty horrible. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to fight. I'm going to wear my mask and I'm going to take my kid into this store so that they can see that at least this family's trying. Like, you know what I mean? Like the absolute, like critical thinking and discernment is just completely out the window. Like they said, put on a mask and stand 6 feet apart. And now I've got drive-through windows telling me that I need to, with their parts, we're masked and we've got the plexiglass. And now around town, we've got the signs that say you have to be masked in your car to come to the drive-through window. I'm not fucking doing it. I'm not doing it. I'll turn off my car and sit here.
I'll be here all day. Exactly.
I'll be here all fucking day long. And you keep my food in front of me so you don't spit on it.
Yep.
I'm not leaving. I'm not putting on a mask in my own vehicle.
No, we need to do that. We need to dedicate a day and just go to the drive-through. And if they won't serve you, be like, fine, I'll just sit here.
Content.
I'll just sit here. And then what's going to happen is the tow truck will show up. Like the police will show up. The tow truck will show up. I'm not leaving. Just give me my damn food. And then we'll just have to go through the whole deal, right? Well, that'll be a bonus episode right there. There we go. Perfect.
Yeah, but what fast food can you get anything worth eating at?
Well, I'm just saying, it's not about the food. Now we'll throw the food away when we're done.
But they did tell me, she came up to me and she said, ma'am, you have to have her masked. And my daughter also, my daughter who was 12 at the time, she's a petite girl also. She doesn't look like I looked at 12 years old, so she doesn't even look like she's maybe, some teenagers look older. That wasn't the case, but she came up to me. It was like day 3 of the kid mask thing. And she's like, oh, and just, the fear in her eyes. She's behind her mask. I'm behind my mask. And she's like, ma'am, she can't be in here without a mask. And I'm like, she's a minor. She's not subject to the mask mandate. I'm not going to tell them she's 12 and she's right off that cusp. It's none of their business anyways. I'm her parent. And by the way, this is a store I was in probably every single week for the last 4 years. So that's fine. But anyways, she said, oh, I'm just going to have to get the manager. And they're just looking all around. They were just so afraid. And I was like, you know what? Fuck you, fascists, I'm out. It was pretty ugly. I'm not always proud of my behavior, but like later I also feel empowered by my own behavior. Like, it's so obnoxious that I'm being refused service because like I've got a healthy kid standing next to me. Like we could go down these rabbit holes all day, but at the end of the day, it's obvious that this is a sham. Yeah. It's a total sham through and through. And for us, and I feel like a lot of time we were saying like, well, I'm not saying COVID isn't real, or I'm not saying this, or the virus hasn't isolated. It has. I don't give a crap if it's been isolated, if it exists, if there's a test for it or not. I am an American citizen. I am a free American woman, sorta, so far still. And I say that I would rather be exposed to illness, that I would rather take my chances with my immune system, and that I choose to make that decision for my children as well. And if you're afraid, you stay home. If you want your groceries delivered, you let that happen. If you think it's not safe to go swim at the ocean or go to the river, then stay in your fucking house, because that's not what me and mine are going to choose to do. You don't quarantine and isolate healthy people, and you don't test healthy people for the presence of illness that doesn't present itself in any symptoms. It's counterintuitive to medicine. It's counterintuitive to science. And how many times in my children's early years did I think that they might have had strep throat or ear infected back before I even understood that we were allowed to just heal at home and like sicknesses happen? I was like totally sold on the pharmacy fixing it. Yeah, right. What happened to that girl?
I don't know. Yeah.
Anyways, I'm sorry. I lost my train of thought.
I'm sorry. That. I was going to say, dude, like that's a great point. Like I would rather get COVID once a month and just be out of the game for 2 weeks than deal with all this bullshit. Like I would gladly take COVID any day of the week over this.
Yeah. Like, well, all I was going to say is how often have I asked my doctors over the years that I want to test for this? I want to run a test for that. Before we give an antibiotic, I want to run a test. Oh, it's an unnecessary test. Your insurance company's not going to pay for that. That's an unnecessary test. You don't have any symptoms of that. It's an unnecessary test. So we don't need to x-ray for that because you're not presenting with A, B, and C. So it's unnecessary. You know what? The PCR test is unnecessary. Furthermore,
it's not even a test.
It's not even a test. So, I mean, yeah, that whole thing where people like, I have people I know where they're like, I get tested once a week because I have, older relatives. And I'm like, please don't talk to me anymore. Please unfriend me on Facebook and me. Like, I can't, block. I want to have compassion. And like for a while, probably for about the first 2 months when people were saying like, well, I do this because other people are afraid. I wear my mask because I'm not afraid, but other people are afraid. All right. I'm going to give that to you for 6 weeks. I'm going to give that to you for 6 weeks and not for the rest of my life. You have stopped all relevant life for all human beings, not in this just in this country, but around the globe. And America sets the tone. We have a responsibility, I feel, to show other nations what freedom is and to continue to stand on that sovereignty, because that is why we're a beautiful country. Those are the ideals that we're supposed to fight for. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's kind of my love-hate relationship with nationalism, because I understand the danger of it. You're pledging allegiance to a flag that, like, what exactly does it represent? What, can they use my emotional attachment to this idea of America to send me into a war in Iraq after September 11th or whatnot?
Yep.
But, and usually, I am very anti-nationalism to some extent, but during this whole lockdown and during, all the recent protests and whatnot, some of that nationalism, it's what made people want to go out and fight, because it was like, oh, no, America stands for this. America is this. We're supposed to have freedoms. We're supposed to have rights. We have a constitution. So you can see some positive aspects to it where, right now that attachment to the flag, that attachment to what that flag stands for, it's what is making people upset, because it's like, wait, this isn't America. We aren't supposed to live like this. We aren't supposed to. So yeah, I mean, it is a internal dilemma, but like back in the day, I used to look at "Don't Tread on Me" flags and like, oh, what a douche, Me
too, totally.
And now,
and I was wearing one around my shoulder at the last rally. By the way, there's this great picture of me face to face with all of the riot police, and I just have this "Don't Tread on Me" flag. So, but please continue. That I felt the same way.
Yeah, no, I that's exactly what I was going to say. And now I look at it and I'm like, yeah, I kind of get what it stands for and why you're waving it proudly, and I can understand that. So, and during the lockdown, I had a lot of people contact me from overseas, listeners from the UK and other parts of Europe. And when things were happening there, one of the things they kept saying was, it won't happen in America. You guys have this like revolutionary type of spirit that's still deep rooted in the history of the country and whatnot. I'm like, yeah, maybe we'll see. I'd like to think so, but I'll admit there's a lot of people that I thought were gonna be much less scared of this virus or much less likely to fall for the propaganda and be so afraid that they're just listening to everything that the TV tells them to do. It's so many people I lost respect for, because I'm like, you're supposed to be this hard ass, like, dude. And now you're like, you're wearing a mask everywhere. You're, if they tell you don't get together with your family members during the holidays, you don't do it. I mean, just literally, you are not thinking for yourself. And they're just, another thing Megan said that I think is so important. Getting sick is completely okay. And it sounds silly, but getting sick is actually healthy, because
it is
good for your immune system.
Yeah, it's good for your immune system. I always say on the podcast, you have to look at it almost like your muscles. Like, if you overwork it out, can it be dangerous? Absolutely. But if you underwork it out, what happens? It gets weak. And it's same thing with your immune system. During the whole lockdown, I always try to practice what I preach. And during the whole lockdown, I had people over my house. Every weekend, people came over and they loved it, because like most of these people, they didn't know anybody else who were letting people in their house and being able to be in like a social atmosphere. And so we had like a whole like lockdown crew. Like we had the regulars that would come every weekend, and the group kept growing, because people were like, yeah, you know what, if you're hanging out with people every weekend and nothing's happening to these people, then maybe we shouldn't be afraid. And people know how much I love my kids. I kept telling people, I'm like, you think I would put my kids in danger if I honestly wasn't 100% sure that they weren't in danger. I'm like,
totally.
I'm letting
great point.
I'm letting my friends come to my house, hang. I don't ask them where the fuck they've been. I don't ask them if they have symptoms. I don't check their temperature. You know, I don't do anything. I just let them come and hang out like we've always had, like just you know, and we would hang out. And guess what? Thank you for bringing over germs, because so many kids were being sanitized to death and they were not exposed to anything. And the second they get hit with a virus that has any strength whatsoever, it's going to hit them hard. Just like many of us who go long periods of time without getting sick. And what happens when you do eventually get sick? It hits you hard because your immune system hasn't been worked out. It's natural. Dr. Thomas Cowan, who I had on a while ago. Yeah, but I had him on, but it was before a lot of people knew who he was, because now he's really, picked up some attention from his perspectives during the lockdown or whatnot. But he would say such interesting things. And one of the reasons why I became a fan of his and wanted to have him on my podcast was because so many things we were looking at in the wrong way that I really didn't even think about until somebody like him said it. But even something like a fever, for example, and this is something that kind of stuck with me that I remembered. He talked about like your first immediate reaction is like, this person has a fever, we got to get it down. Well, do you? Or is your body intelligent enough where what it's actually trying to do is sweat something out? It's trying to kill a virus. Maybe it's getting to a certain temperature. So it's all these things, like your body's smart. I mean, we've survived this many years, thousands of years, because it obviously knows how to survive. It knows how to fight viruses. It knows how to stay breathing and reproduce. So a lot of times when you get a scab, you don't think like, oh shit, like my body's doing something weird, let me get rid of this. No, it's healing itself. So it's a very similar type of idea, where it's like a lot of times your reaction to something the reaction is its way of dealing with the virus or the issue that it's dealing with. When you have a stomach bug, or specifically when you have food poisoning, you're throwing up, you're going to the bathroom. Why? Because your body knows there's something not good in it and it's trying to get rid of it. So when you go to a doctor, all the doctor is going to do is take care of the symptoms. It's going to figure out, okay, how do I constipate you, or how do I, whatever. But it doesn't think like, okay, this is actually natural. It's a good thing because your body's trying to detox itself, it's trying to fix itself. And they definitely won't tell you that you could just take active charcoal and kill the bacteria immediately and be fine. I know, because I've had food poisoning in the past when I was a kid, and I remember like waiting in the waiting room at the hospital. Yes, even back in the day, people waited in hospitals. Yeah, that's not abnormal. Yep. And I remember waiting at the hospital, and because I was throwing up every couple minutes. It was crazy. And I get there, I'm uncomfortable, obviously sweating. I'm rushing to the bathroom while I'm waiting, and then they're just like, yeah, you just got to stay hydrated. And try to eat bread or toast or whatever. I'm like, oh, great advice. I could have Googled in the comfort of my own home. But I end up later in life, as I got into more natural remedies and stuff like that, I found out that you could just take active charcoal. It kills the bacteria immediately. This next time I got food poisoning, I took it and my stomach calmed down immediately. And it's good. It's actually, some people use it for detoxing and all types of things. But my point is, like, these things you're not going to be told about. And I'm sure I had some other greater point that I was going, but now I went down the whole.
Well, I want to comment that Dr. Tom Cowan, I just love him. I've heard him on many different podcasts, but just the thing on the fevers too, I just wanted to comment. Like, he referenced some other doctor that, there used to be this doctor that he said, give me a fever and I can cure anything. Like, I believe he cured someone's cancer by keeping them with a fever for like a month. Like, fever is actually a very effective tool. And they used to, it's one of those things, again, it's just that they've painted it in a bad way. So you have to be dependent on pharma, right?
Well, they have. And the truth is too, like you're saying, like fevers, I feel like that's the way that they start us as parents to become indoctrinated into pharma right away, because I'm pretty sure I still have books on my shelf at home from 20 years ago, What to Expect When You're Expecting, and several others that will tell you on the list of supplies you should have when you bring your infant home from the hospital. Tylenol is at the top of that list. For a brand new infant, and
symptom management. That's because all they're doing.
Absolutely. That fevers are something to be, I have a cousin who has done, paramedics, and he's a firefighter in California for, the last 20, 25 years. But I know that he's talked to me about, you have to use discernment. He's like, I have had calls where we have parents who will call us because their kids are, seizing. Like they're at 105, 106, we've got a teenager at home and their fever's been so high so long with, no tepid water to bring it down. No. I mean, you have to have some discernment. You can only let it come down for 4 hours, right? But fevers are healing. No. And so like when my kids aren't like at nighttime, when my kids are sick, that's the worst part. You know how it is when you're sick, nighttime is always the worst. So sometimes if they're, if it's getting too high, or especially if it's giving them a terrible headache and they can't sleep, a lot of times at night, I'll use a little something to help it come down for their comfort. But with understanding that in the morning, we're going to let that rage on because that's what's going to kill it. We take our lukewarm baths and we have, fresh broths and all of those things, but we take care of our bodies. We don't treat symptoms because, and in my opinion too, when you're putting all this shit in your body too, your liver and your kidneys have to process that out. I mean, and we're constantly being inundated by our environment and in particular by the food we put in our bodies out of big grocery stores, that our body's having to kick out all of these toxins, all these chemicals, all these preservatives, all of these food colorings. And we had Tim James, and it terrified me when we came to the conclusion that I eat way too many M&Ms now that I know what those colors are. But so I also have Chris Kirchhoff's, heavy metal detox stuff beside my bed. So we're working on it. But anyways, yeah, I think that that's a huge thing that gets missed. And so like with my older kids, I remember when kids start pulling their ear, oh, we're going to go down. We need an antibiotic. That was what I thought. We need an antibiotic. It didn't occur to me that we could let that run, that we could, there's garlic drops through the ears. There's, and little kids, those little eustachian tubes, they're so tiny. It's normal and common for those to get backed up and to hurt. Now, if you start having an ear infection and then in 4 or 5 or 6 days, you get a huge spike. Well, maybe you've got a little problem with the eardrum. Maybe you've got maybe something needs done, but it doesn't usually need done. And more often than not, what they're doing is and just on this one thing with antibiotics, you have worried parents and doctors who are, taught to push these, healing remedies, and they're just giving. And so now we've got, this huge resistance to bacteria. We've got this huge resistance. It's like, we'll go to the grocery store and I think we have all of the sanitized carts and the kids standing outside with their masks on. And I'm like, and I'll walk up and go for the drones. And like, oh no, those aren't clean. I'm like, please don't wipe my cart. It comes to my turn at the counter and they have all their antibacterial, they're squirting all the ATM machine. I'm like, please don't do that. Please don't do that for me. I don't hold you accountable. Please don't do that. That is the most unhealthy thing I can imagine. Before COVID, we had antibacterial in my car. And so whenever I was out with my kids at the lake or wherever we were, inside the grocery store, we get in the car, we put a little squirt on your hands. I don't know where people have been, and now I'm just like, don't fucking use it. Yeah. Nobody uses it. We don't have antibacterial anymore. No more of that. We wash your hands with soap and water when we get home like normal people and go on about our lives.
Yeah, so we eat food off the ground, everything, man.
And to be fair, I think a lot of the science that's come around about the microbiome has been in the last literally like 10 years. And just like how, like all the sanitized stuff that we have, like we know, like our guts are suffering because of it. We need to be outdoors and around. I mean, the people with pets that have pets bringing stuff in from outdoors, they have way healthier microbiomes, right? Like what we're doing is very counterintuitive to what we actually know scientifically now. And you look at doctors like Dr. Zach Bush, who's really getting into that microbiome, and I think we have a lot to learn in that realm, but like what we're doing is definitely the wrong direction.
Well, they're using chemicals and petroleum-based pharmaceuticals to completely separate us from our organic humanity, as if going the other direction. I think that's the lie that's been sold to us, is like, that's more powerful. We're more powerful as computers. We're more powerful with medicine. We can be all of these things. And that's the lie, is that we're not powerful in and of ourselves, that we're not able to have these higher revelations or these higher ways of living if we disconnect from this matrix that they have forced us inside of. More and more lately, I keep sending it to the guys, but I really want to move off grid. And I have a brother who has, for the last almost 7 years now in Missouri, they have fully running farm, no electricity, well water, beehives, but they went out there with a trailer and knowing nothing. And now they've done all of these things. And so I'm watching people build, mud huts and cob cottages, and what was the aircrete, I think. So there's like hempcrete and foamcrete. Now there's aircrete to make like these domed buildings. But anyways, one of the ladies I was watching last night was just talking about, she was explaining, how she doesn't have furniture and all this thing. And as you start to listen to her reasoning, she sits on the floor. She, is more in touch with her environment. She's like, she's like, people say I don't have a lot of space. It's this little hut. made out of like mud and branches, you know, and it's all overgrown with moss and ferns, and it's absolutely magical. And I'm just like, she's like, but I don't spend my days sitting in there. Like my house isn't about like material things. And I sit in there and look at my TV and I'm looking at all my beautiful things on the wall. She's like, I'm out about like interacting in nature. I'm with animals. I'm gathering water. I'm cutting wood. I'm preparing my meals. I'm, you know, consciously making decisions all the time for my well-being and sustaining my way of life. So it sounds infinitely richer than any story that was ever painted for me, or that in any path I was following prior to this whole pandemic. And so as I see people living in these other ways and getting back to their roots, learning how to grow things, learning how, you know, all kinds of farming, animal husbandry, you know, crafts, you know, basket weaving, making, I mean, it seems like things that I never would have thought I would say or be interested in. But as I actually look into these other lifestyles, I'm like, you know what, you know, sometimes you just hear someone say something, you're like, yep, that's true. Or you like see something, you're like, yep, that's for me. And this is totally what it's been for me. Absolutely. So
are they going to let us do it though? I don't know.
Well, you don't want Elon Musk's brain implant?
I think that's another hill I came to die on.
Well, if transhumanism, that whole agenda is real, and they want us to, at some point, give up our bodies and to be connected to machines, what better way to convince people than make them so sick and so unhappy that you know what, living in a virtual reality is much better than living in this sick, you know, depressing body that is full, you know, medicated. And that's the thing, like we call it medicine, but people have to realize like you're not actually curing yourself of anything. What you're doing, it's symptom management. Like you have an illness that causes a symptom. That illness is not directly affected at all. You're just taking care of that symptom. Dr. Chris Kresher, who said, I believe on the Rogan podcast, when he said, you know, modern medicine's like having pain because you have a rock in your shoe, and instead of telling you to take off the shoe and get rid of the rock, they give you a painkiller for the pain. You know, that's basically modern medicine. I mean, that's how things work. So it's we live in a crazy time where people, there is this sense of like, hey, maybe we should look back of our ancestors, or look at all these studies where there's no depression and no unhappiness, or very little examples of it in these primitive ancestors, in people who live in the Amazon that are completely detached from other communities. I mean, when you look at communities where the richest and the poorest, that gap is much smaller. The smaller it is, the less likely you're going to see depression and anxiety and all these things. So, and I'm a huge fan of Dr. Christopher Ryan from Tangentially Speaking. Unfortunately, I only got him to show up to the Union of Unwanted show for seconds before he
saw that.
And it's funny because when I edited that video, I purposely made sure that I'm like, let me edit it right at the point where people can see him, so they know I'm not full of shit when I said I got him to show up, and then you know, because then he literally like 2 seconds later he punched out, and but I still want to have him back on my show and talk to him just as a solo guest. But his book, Civilized to Death, and a lot of the things he would say that I think we talked about when he was on my show, you know, a while ago. But this whole idea of progress, like what is progress? These questions I think are important, because it's like we keep thinking like, okay, progress is better technology and we get to go to places quicker and we have internet that's faster and all this stuff. So we keep progressing with technology. We keep thinking like it's going to make life better. But like as technology advances and all these other things get better, what gets worse is our happiness, quality of life. Our quality of life. And we keep thinking like quality of life means like having technology, but it's not, you know, like we're not happier. We're not, you know, and he uses this metaphor. He tells this story about like, if you look at the winners, right? In quotes, the winners are people who have all the material wealth, right? They have the expensive car, they have the private jet, they have all the money, the jewelry, all this stuff, maybe the trophy wife, all this stuff. If those people come to find out are unhappy, self-medicating, have trauma that they're dealing with, don't have a good relationship with their kids and family members, So technically, even the winners are losing. Then maybe we have to rethink the whole fucking game. Maybe we have to rethink the whole system. And I think those bigger questions are important. That's why I was such a fan of the Venus Project back in the day, Design Geist movement. I know I've had a lot of people on my show that aren't fans of Design Geist movement because I think they don't like the solution. But what I think is important about the Design Geist movement is the idea that it helped people come to the conclusion that they could rethink the way our reality, our system is. Like, for example, when kids are born, they're not aware of money and currency. If we say, hey, we pay things with hugs, so when somebody does something nice to you, you give a hug, and that's how you repay them. That's the reality they would live in. That they'd be okay with accepting that. So like, we're conditioned as people, like, this is the way the world works. We pay with currency, we do this, we do that. We go to a public school that teaches you this, and and all this stuff. And we never like consider the fact that like this isn't the way things have to be. This is just the way things are, and we can completely redesign and rethink society as a whole. That's why even I've had Professor Richard Wolff on, who is one of the leading scholars in Marxism. I'm sure you guys are familiar with him, and socialism, because he's on a lot of different shows. And I remember Charlie Robinson like telling me, he's like, oh, I listened to that show. He's like, and this was like right after he came from like Anarcho Poco, and I'm like, well, you did? I'm like, what the hell are you doing listening to that show? You just came from like Anarcho Poco. And he's like, oh, it was fascinating or whatnot. And I like the fact that like we're all willing to explore those ideas, because I think the answer, well, I think there is no answer. There is no one answer. It's hybrid. It's a lot of different things. And I think humans are also really interesting in regards to like, we think if we do this will be the outcome. Then you do it and you're like, wait, they reacted slightly different. Or we realize that humans are very complex. Like I always make the argument that like corporations aren't inherently evil. Government isn't inherently evil. Like you could say, in theory, if we do this and we do that and we put these people to regulate this and like everything will work out. But once you put it in practice, you realize like, okay, humans are flawed. So wherever there's humans, there's going to be somebody who's going to manipulate the system, take advantage of the system, maybe even remold the system to make it to give them the ability to do something corrupt or whatnot. So I think I hope people are taking shots every time I say whatnot. And but so I do think that all these things are super interesting, and I love exploring. I love talking to libertarians and hear them try to explain like, okay, how can a society interact with and communicate and exist and survive without some type of government funding or government programs or public schools or who's paving the roads and all this stuff. I love hearing these debates because I'm not sure. And I like to explore these ideas. And I can't say I know for sure when a libertarian says, no, this is how humans would react and this is how it would get done. I can say, yeah, maybe or maybe not. I'm not sure. But my point is, like, we know our system's broken. We know that the way things are now either inherently doesn't work or it's people just taking advantage of the system. Because I've heard those debates too, and I like to entertain both. I think that I do entertain the idea that maybe if things were run the way the founding fathers wanted it to be run, without people manipulating it, maybe it would work out. Maybe we wouldn't have the issues.
Absolutely.
Yep. And I entertain that idea too, and I do think that, people like to look at the Constitution or the Bill of Rights of all these things. And they think like, this is like, scripture, like you have to, and I'm like, well, why can't we debate these things? Why can't we, reanalyze it or whatnot? Is it important? Yeah. I think if the idea makes sense, then we should defend it. If the idea doesn't make sense, we shouldn't defend it just because somebody before us said, hey, this is the most important of ideas. So I think all these, and that's what I love about podcasting. And I love, because so often in our everyday life, we go to work, we take care of our kids, we do our chores, we watch the TV and, for 2 seconds to get mad at the propaganda they're trying to tell people. And whatever we're doing, we don't spend a lot of time exploring ideas and exploring these things, so often we'll jump on a team and say, okay, I'm on team, socialism, because I think that people are struggling and people should get help, or we think that people and there's logical, I think, sincere arguments from all aspects. I think when you look at the idea that there are people who are in debt and forever will be in debt because unfortunately medically they got dealt a bad hand of cards, that they have some medical issues that they had zero control over, or maybe they did have control over it, but they were sold some lies about what they should be eating, so they end up fucking themselves in that manner. So I do feel bad for those people, and the idea of like giving everybody universal healthcare, I get that. I get that there's people who their heart are in the right place. They truly believe that can help them. So, and I do explore all these things. I think that these bigger questions and these bigger picture questions are important, because if we understand that they're trying to mold society this way, I think it is important to think like, okay, well, if we don't want society molded that way, how are we going to mold society, and how would we want it? And I think a lot of times the answer, like Megan said, it's looking at our primitive ancestors. So often you look at like the way they lived, they were happier, they were healthier. You look at like the fact that they find tribes and that literally have no signs of cavities, and even the way they eat, they talk about how like the reason why we have such issues with our wisdom teeth coming in and whatnot is because our diets are so bad that our hormone levels have been all fucked up. And you look at like primitive ancestors, they had wider faces, so they had room. You're supposed to have room for all your teeth to come in, where now it's like we all have much skinnier faces because of our diets. So like all these things, it looks like every time we think we're smarter than our ancestors, come to find out they knew something that we didn't give them credit for. It's so many, a gut feeling, right? That's saying, oh, I have a gut feeling. It's just something people say. We never really think about it or analyze that statement. But that's something that people have been saying for a long time. And now people come to the conclusion that, oh shit, there's some gut brain connection. And some people even call it a second brain. So it's like people have been saying gut feeling forever, not even realizing that, like, or maybe some people realize, and that's the thing. Our ancestors, just because they didn't understand the way it worked doesn't mean they couldn't understand it did work. So a lot of times people are like, oh, they're primitive idiots. Well, maybe, but some of the shit that they did, to tease, the whatever, that stuff worked. Maybe they couldn't explain to you what chemically, or they're not they don't have a PhD in bio where they could explain what's going on. But even if you have no knowledge of biology, if you take something and it seems to help you, then they at least know it's helping. And I think too often we dismiss it like, oh, they're idiots or whatever, just because they didn't have the deeper understanding of it or the science understanding of it. When science itself is, that's a whole nother thing. Just how religious that's become, and how and it's crazy because it's like, in a way, there's a lot of religious people coming to the conclusion that science is a religion, and pushing back against that. And I think that, like I said on Monday's show, like I find a lot of people who are fighting the same fights I'm fighting being the most religious of people. And I think that a little bit of it does have to do with the fact that a lot of people who are, anti-religion, like even the whole atheist movement, one of my issues with it was, like initially I'm like, I was raised a Catholic, I was always rebelling against that whole thing and going to Sunday school, and I didn't want to play soccer when I was a kid. I wanted a BMX and skateboard, and I wanted to listen to heavy metal, and I wanted to go against authority and all that stuff. And I'm like, yeah, religion, that's just a cult. They don't, anytime I have answers like or questions, they don't have answers, I just get in trouble. And so obviously they're closed-minded or whatnot. And then I'm like, oh, these atheists, they're open-minded. They're very open-minded. So I joined that cult, and then I'm like, oh shit, like these guys are just as closed-minded as the people over there. Like they're just closed-minded on different issues. And then you realize that like the atheists and the for science people, the most unscientific thing you can do is think that you have it figured out. Like I forget who I'm quoting, but somebody's like, nobody's dug more graves for theories than science. Like they're constantly reinventing themselves and reanalyzing themselves and saying, hey, we have it figured out. Oh no, this scientist says, this study shows a different outcome or whatnot. And the crisis for science, I don't know if you guys have seen that. It's a great short documentary by James Corbett, of course, because every great documentary.
Maybe we have then.
Yeah. And but the crisis of science is awesome. I mean, it really shows this internal dilemma and how easy it is to get something peer reviewed and published. Like this idea that that's the gold standard is bullshit. Like there have been people who put out fake studies just to prove how easy it is to get something reviewed. I mean, look at the fucking food pyramid. I mean, the food pyramid was grown up full of carbs and pastas and breads. You know, that didn't get you health. That got you obese. That got you, you know, so it's just, it's obvious that like
it got us back on Big Pharma. That's exactly it. Yeah. Pushing it in public school health class to make sure that we took that chart home. I remember them telling take that chart home to our parents. So that later we could have issues. It's also clear. It's also connected. Just every time we have these talks about any of these kinds of things, I'm just like, it's just all connected to what they've been trying to do to us this whole time.
Yeah, but this is why Big Pharma feels like the biggest threat out of them all. You know, over and over again, because you know, if we're in a war, if we're not in a war, if we're in Syria, if we're not in Syria, it's hard to get people passionate. It's hard to get people worked up because they get to enjoy life as they always had. But now this is so, it's so in our personal lives. It's seeping into every aspect of everything we do. How are people not upset? How are people not worked up? When Jason Burmis is on a show and he's talking about how he goes to bed pissed off, he wakes up pissed off. I'm like, I feel you, man. Cause it's like, if I think about this stuff and then there is this internal battle of, don't get pissed off so much, because the reason you're fighting, the reason you're mad is because you feel like you're being restricted on your ability to enjoy life. So what you can enjoy, make sure you enjoy it, because we can get so angry all the time that we stop doing the thing that we're fighting for. All we want is to have the freedom to enjoy life and be free humans where we can interact with one another and enjoy life. And I mean, we don't know how long we have on this earth. This idea that like just lock down for a month, for 2 months. Oh, 2020, let's just scrap 2020 and start again in 2021. It's like, I just want to shake people. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Some people didn't have 2021. You know, a lot of people didn't make it to 2021. It wasn't because of COVID. It was because of other reasons. You know, I had a friend who passed away from a heart issue in 2020. So this idea that you're taking, I mean, we always say like, don't take tomorrow for granted or whatnot. And now, there's another shot, but I said whatnot, if you're wondering, but for the fact that people can just say like, oh yeah, we'll just worry for till next year. You're taking each day for granted. You're literally telling us to take 12 months and just forget about, sacrifice 12 months, give up 12 months of your life, even though you don't know how long you're going to live for, but sacrifice a whole year and financially put yourself in some issues. What's happened to restaurants and people who work. I mean, that's the thing. It's not even just restaurant owners. People who work there, I mean, are affected. What do we export? We don't export shit besides war. The only thing, one of our biggest industries is the restaurant business. I mean, so many people are connected to restaurants. So like people bringing in the food, people growing the food, people serving the food. Everybody is affected by this, and the fact that we're just going to be like, yeah, no big deal. Like, oh, well, for a virus that now every time somebody gets it, we just look at it as like, yeah, no big deal. We'll just wait till you get, till you have your quarantine. And the fact that there's so many asymptomatic people, why is herd immunity not being discussed over and over again? Literally, I've gotten to the point where
they changed the definition.
Yeah, well, they did, but 1 out of 2 or 3 people I know, and I'm sure if I actually wrote down everybody I know, which would be a lot, they locally 1 out of 2 or 3 people have had COVID, and yet nobody's saying, well, can we open shit up? Like, we obviously have herd immunity. Like, everybody has COVID. Every fucking NBA player has COVID. Every soccer player has COVID. Everybody has COVID and nobody's dying. So how many examples do you need of people saying I'm asymptomatic before you get to the point they're like, obviously this isn't a deadly virus, even though publicly everybody's saying they're asymptomatic, but yet we're still acting like we're in a state of emergency. And that's the thing. Like, all these restrictions and all this ability to kind of ignore the Constitution and ignore our rights has been because we're in a state of emergency. Well, obviously we're not in a fucking state of emergency. So we just have to put an end to this. I mean, again, I'm just like you guys. I get worked up when I'm talking about this, and it is
for
sure.
It's just it's hard not to get upset because
certainly
it's I don't want to talk about it. I want it to be over. I want to be able to move on to other topics. Can I talk about World War II again? Can I talk about like other interesting stuff? But it's like every time you do, it's like you watch the TV or you hear about some new fucking crazy restriction or how they want to, I feel bad for first responders. These people who have to get the vaccine to keep their job. All these guinea pigs that have been brainwashed to believe that they're doing something for the greater good, that they truly, and that's the thing. And I feel bad because I know that in their hearts of hearts, they truly believe that the vaccine is helping them and it's for the greater good. And if everybody got it, all this would end, but it's never going to fucking end. They're going to come up with a new strain. Then we're gonna have to get a new vaccine, and Big Pharma will find some other way of getting in our personal lives. The money that's in this stuff, you're getting the vaccine for free. Somebody's fucking paying for it. The pharma companies aren't giving it out for free. They still want their money. So people have to think about that. Like when you see free flu vaccine, somebody's making money off it. Like they're not giving, it's not like they're just produced.
And somebody's the product. Somebody's the product. We're the right. Yeah, exactly. We're watching ourselves be guinea pigs on live TV on every platform. Yeah. So sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's okay. So I needed interrupting, or I might have never ended.
That's okay. You and I have that in common, so it works out well. It's fine.
It's great. Holy crap!
But yeah. I know we've been talking for, what is it, 11 p.m. here.
Almost 2.5 hours, dude.
Yeah.
Oh, see, there's mine. You guys take a shot. I just said, dude, man.
Okay.
So I didn't realize I was going to go back later and take shots for all of the times you say that in shows. So I'm going to have a fun weekend. Now I have some catching up to. I'm gonna,
Who does the editing? Because I hate listening to myself when I have to edit. I'm like, oh, I don't want to hear this.
So I do it primarily, and I've been trying to get them up to speed so I can take a vacation one of these days. But that's all right. No, I love it, dude. I love it. Speaking of journeys, though, Ricky, I went and watched your pilot episode. Was it yesterday, the day before? Your episode 1, so great, man. like yeah, it was great. It was great.
For yourself with that.
No, it was great, man. You're like, I'm a liberal atheist. I'm like, wow, we've come a long ways. But to be fair, like Ed pointed out, like the definition of being a liberal has changed so much. Like it's just insane.
I would.
Yeah. I mean, I've said that also on the show. That just the idea that, it's I don't feel like what I stood for changes or has changed. Sure. I just feel like
exactly
the way I would label myself for people to understand would change.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
I've had Adam Sporgy on early in the podcast, and he's all for anti big pharma because they want to make sure that weed doesn't become legal because it's a plant medicine and people are getting some benefits from it. And it's like a lot of those people that were standing on that battle with me were liberals, were people on the left who wanted to get weed legally, and didn't think it was fair. And now, like, all the people who are fighting against big pharma seem to be on the right, So like you said, like it's not that I don't feel like I've changed that. And of course, I think you have this many podcasts, this many conversations, you're going to evolve, you're going to change slightly. And I think if you're not open to that, you're not being fair to yourself, I think, and you're going to restrict yourself. And possibly you could end up being wrong on something for a long period of time because you didn't explore the other perspectives. So I think that's that's something that's going to come. But I think in many cases, like you said, Scott, I think I'm going to be like, I used to call myself this, and I call myself this now, but I stand for the same thing. It's just
totally
sure.
So we just stay the same, and the world just crashes down around us, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys are going to find that. I'm sure you're going to go back and listen to episodes.
Oh, sure. I already have. Yeah, I listened to our first episode. I'm like, oh my God.
I don't listen to that.
I don't ever go back. I can't. It's hard enough for me just to show up and not sweat down the back of my shirt. I feel like that's my forward progress. I don't need to see what happened in the past at this point.
It's honestly, watching Megan just come alive in this thing has been such a powerful thing too. Like she's become just such a strong voice, and like, man, dude, like it's been amazing just watching her just grow into what she's becoming.
I have to admit, like I've picked people, like I'm like, we need to get that person on because I think that person and Megan are going to hit it off. And then like if we can just ignite Megan, like me and Scott can just sit back. We just sit back.
Yeah. Well, I want to tell like a tiny piece of this story. So I went through terrible trauma about 6 years ago, and I lost a lot of my memory. And to this day, I struggle a lot with memory things, and in particular short-term memory. So one of the biggest struggles that I have with doing the podcasting and especially like the inundation of just evidence and information and articles and I mean, it's just, I'm like literally, so I'm starting to shake my foot as I'm saying it, like it gets overwhelming. But when all that happened to me, I really kind of just disconnected from the world. I was kind of a shut-in. I wasn't thriving in life at all. I was seeing doctors that were medicating me hugely. I mean, I've always been just a holistic girl, especially after my daughter was vaccine injured, 20 years ago almost. And I allowed, I think I went back and counted up all the pills that they were prescribing me. So for 2 years, they were prescribing me 7,000 pills a year. That's a lot. So I know that didn't help my memory. I mean, at the time it got me through some of the things that I maybe wouldn't have been able to process or go through, or at least it numbed me to get through these things. I lost my mother to suicide. She took her life in my house, in the bedroom above where I was sleeping. So that fucked me up quite a bit. I was very, very close to my mother. And so that was pretty traumatizing. And then in the times that it took, I hate to say this, I hate to give credit to Facebook, but after a few years, I had a Facebook account, but I wasn't really using it. And then after a couple of years, I was tired of being indoors. I was tired of not talking to people. I had a terrible car accident. I went cold turkey off all my medication, never took any again. I just knew that the time, that the purpose it was supposed to have served, whatever to get me through depression, anxiety, and not functioning, and not sleeping or not being awake, all the things that they were treating me for at the time to get through, it no longer was valid, and I just was done with it. And as I came out, and it was like watching other people live their lives. I have friends internationally. Watching people in. I'm trying to think. Was my most favorite. Shoot, I can't think, but anyways, just beautiful ocean, people living their lives, people connecting. And that's kind of what drew me out, and then I would start to meet with a girlfriend that I hadn't seen in a long time. And then I'm going to see family and all these things. And then I ended up getting into a very enmeshed situation, kind of coming out of that healing with somebody who I still term carefully as a soulmate, but that ended up being tragically abusive. And so I'm coming out of kind of one instance where my mind wasn't right, and kind of, slowly over time, because we all know abusive situations they're not that way from the beginning, right? They digress. So there's just been a lot of things that really have affected my self-confidence and my ability to sit in front of people. And so this whole thing, like when they say that I've come a long way, even still, like as I sit here now, it is a huge, it's an emotional struggle for me, or it's, that's my own personal barrier where I don't feel like that confidence, or especially, and in particular, because of the way my mind doesn't hold information the way that it did, because of the way that I have to keep things in my brain. I can see something over and over and over again, but oftentimes it doesn't stick. It's interesting. Scott and I saw, not this fall, but last, we went to the Eugene Symphony together. And I just happened to come across this picture, and he was saying that he follows the violinist that we saw on Instagram. We were just kind of chatting about that last night. And I said, I'm going to the symphony to see a violinist. That's like the joy of my life. That was why I used to go, but I didn't remember there being a violinist there when we went.
She's a
and
shredder.
He literally sent me a picture of her. And I don't recall it. Yeah. I don't recall it. Like, I remember buying the dress. I remember what the two of us wore, but it's crazy to try to say. And so, like, when I'm just having a conversation with someone who doesn't know that about me, I think a lot of times it just seems like I get carried down a lot of rabbit holes and I lose my train of thought. But the truth of the matter is that 6 years ago, I was very, very on point and able to be very articulate and hold on to my thoughts. And so I get discouraged with myself. And I have, like, especially we get on Union and everyone starts talking and the amount of information, I'm like, oh shit, everything I wanted to say. I'm like, what did she just say? Okay, what I was going to say is completely not valid now. Like, there's that. But we're, this many months in, and I've come this far.
You're killing it, dude.
I'm going to keep going. But this has definitely been outside of my comfort zone, but for a broader purpose. I mean, I say all the time, all growing up, I was told, you have a big mouth, girl. You have a big mouth, girl. You need to learn your place, girl. You need to stay in your lane, like everyone, you need to be a submissive wife, all of these things. And I was really made to feel that how I am and who I am was wrong. Maybe just wrong. I was wrong to be how I am. And then all of this happened. And I just totally felt like God was like, this is why
you found your place.
This is why you have a loud voice. This is why you have a big mouth, girl. This is why you get out of your lane. This is why you're hard to handle at times. This is why you get fiery. This is what I built you for. I know you love to dance at festivals, but this warrior business, this is for you. So anyways, all of these things to say that we've all come a long ways, and so grateful for these two guys sitting with me. These are a couple of my dearest friends in the world. I love them both very, very much. And the connections that we've been able to make with each other, the support that we've had together and with others in this community has been literally life-changing over these months. So we're so grateful to you, Ricky.
Can't say enough thanks to you, Ricky.
Yeah,
man.
Ricky, totally.
Undue gratitude forever, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
The growth is don't be a rule follower, right?
Yeah.
Don't be a rule follower. In a world that's telling all the world rule followers that you're the Retrumplicans and we're going to get you.
The Retrumplicans. Oh my gosh.
Don't be a rule follower. And I'm going to raise my kids to not be rule followers. So they're going to go and they're going to be going against the grain.
Yep. Totally. Oh yeah. It's funny. We start our days and like my kids always come in. I have two adopted children too. But they come in the mornings, and they get all cozy on my bed. You know how kids do when they don't want to do their homework, especially, but it's okay. I'll take what I can get. But sometimes I'm like, all right, they're all stretching. They have those little sleepy kid faces, and my puppy's on the bed and I'm like, shall we listen to David Icke this morning? What? Do we want to turn on a clip from Alex Jones, guys? And I'm like turning this stuff on. And so we have these conversations. So I was saying, I don't remember what it was like 2, 3, 4 weeks ago. Someone was within the last month. And my little boy, he said, we were talking and I said, okay. And, we were talking about NASA and we were talking about Nazi Germany and we're talking about the CIA. And I'm like, and who makes up the CIA? And he's like, Nazis. And I'm like, that's it. That's right. That wasn't on your social studies, but A+, baby. So anyways, it's interesting.
Well, if it makes you feel better, I've always been a believer that being able to regurgitate information doesn't really mean that much to me. Like if you meet somebody and they're you do meet some people who can memorize every name and date and all that stuff, but they're not necessarily the most fascinating person, because they don't know why that information is important, or they're just regurgitating because they're trying to sound smart or intelligent. To me, talking about ideas are much more interesting, and knowing how some of that information relates to your life. Like if it doesn't, like Daniele Bignelli would say, if it doesn't help you understand yourself or the world around you, then what good is it? What good is the information? And too many people, that's what they are. They're book smart. They're just regurgitating information. They sound really intelligent, but then how many people who are really book smart, if you sat at a table and you just talked about whatever, I just share some stories or personal opinions or philosophies, wouldn't sound like the most intelligent person at a table or the most fascinating or the most well thought out. So, and I still get those things. I mean, I've been doing this show for almost 300 episodes now, and since late 2013, and I still forget shit because I get nervous. I still mess up because I get nervous. I get really insecure about my intelligence or my ability to hold a conversation or whatnot. I mean, that's just what makes you human. I think people can see past that. I think people, for example, one of the most popular people that have been on and hosted Union Than Unwanted, Sam Tripoli. Nobody fucks up more names than Sam Tripoli. Everybody loves Sam Tripoli. Why? He's sincere. He's a good person. He doesn't always get the facts right, but his heart's in the right place. So that's something I constantly remind myself, and I remind others, like, you're going to fuck up on things. You're going to get a specific stat or quote wrong or whatnot, but it's the idea behind it. Just get the idea right and be sincere, and they'll completely, everybody has a fucking smartphone. You look it up yourself. Why do I have to get it right? I mean,
I love it. Yes.
I'll get you in the area, I'll give you the key words, the good to search, and then you can figure out the rest. It's like, to me, that's much more important. Get me in the area, bring up somebody that maybe I've never heard of, or a study I've maybe never heard of. And if you give me the idea of what the study is about, then I'll go look into it myself. I don't need you to give me every specific thing. So to me, hopefully that reassures you that
it does actually. That gives me a lot of confidence, and that's deeply encouraging too, because I think that's where I get I'm like, okay, I know this, but I don't fucking know why I know this. It's that kind of stuff where people are like, well, where did you get that? I'm like, I'm going to research that and get right back to you. You know what I mean? Like that. And that's a good point. I think that the dynamics and the sincerity is everything. I mean, you can have, like you say, all the information in the world, which I definitely don't have. But what people want is to hear genuine. I mean, what the alternative to alternative media is that they're not getting genuine. They're not getting real. They're not getting passion. They're not getting something that's well thought out, well researched. They're getting, sound bites and CIA agents feeding them, deep state propaganda. So I do feel encouraged by those words. Definitely. That encourages me a bit.
I think it was Mark Twain who said, like, why memorizing anything you can look up? And it's true. Like, why memorize? Why just memorize? Like, why am I going to waste storage in my brain for shit that I can just look up when I need to? Like, as long as I know the idea. Like, for me, I always say I don't remember the thing, but I remember what I learned from that thing. So it's like, okay, I read this study, I read that study, I listened to this person, I watched that documentary, I listened to that podcast, and that all helped me come to this conclusion. Yep. I might not remember all that shit that brought me to this conclusion, but I remember the conclusion. So I know my conclusion is backed by good information that I don't remember. Totally. But
that's it.
But that's important. That's important to me. That conclusion is equally is more important, because you can always look up that information. You can always find that information. Be like, okay, let me send you the study that I know, brought me here, and let me send you this. Let me send you that. I might not remember everything about that study, but when I read it, I remember it was making sense, and those dots were connecting. So, I think often we give too much credit for people who can just regurgitate stuff. To me, it's not nearly as important. As the conclusion is what's important. What you learn from that stuff is important. So, but yeah, I mean, not to keep you guys up, too much.
We're keeping you up, man. Holy crap!
I love doing this stuff. I could do this.
Okay, cool.
But so I'll let people know where they can get my podcast for your listeners.
Totally.
And vice versa. You want to do that?
Sounds great.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So
for Ricky,
rippleeffectpodcast.com, rippleeffectpodcastmerch.com. It's on Float. It's on, and thank you guys for always doing that. I really appreciate it.
They never tell me when they're about to do that. I want to coordinate and do the three of us, but like the last two times, I didn't get the group chat and memo. Sorry to interrupt you, Ricky.
It's all right. But and then Patreon, obviously support the show on Patreon, which somebody has been doing it from you guys, and I really appreciate you guys supporting the show. It's awesome. It really means a lot. And I'm like you guys. I'm like, as long as I don't lose money, I'm happy. So I'm at that point where I'm not losing money. So I'm happy with that. And that's it. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Float, Odyssey, all the same places you guys are, and probably eventually also on Rockfin.
Cool. RV Theory 6, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Cool.
All right, listeners, you want to let everybody know where you guys are at?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we've kind of alluded to it. We just started a page on Rockfin, rockfin.com/Truthzilla. Come check us out over there. We got a little bit of premium content. We got a new Truthzilla shirt store too. We have a website, truthzilla.org. You can always find us there if we disappear from whatever platform you're watching us on. And so the shirt store is truthzilla.org/shirts. We got a awesome shirt that was designed by Cheney from Idiocalypse.
Yes.
And the rest of them are all original. A lot of them are Megan's. Megan's got the cool ones, like You Can't Inject Health. That's a great one. I love that one.
Truth.
And anyways, other than that, we're on all platforms like Float, Instagram, Facebook as at Truthzilla, and then on Odyssey. Yep. Odyssey. All of our videos less than an hour as of right now. And then to be continued. Yeah, we're working on getting them uploaded to BitChute and at Truthzilla Pod on Twitter. That's it.
Yeah.
This is why he says that.
Yeah. Talk to Matt from Content Safe to see if he can help you out too. He's awesome.
Totally. Yeah.
He was great.
He's great. He's a tech guy. He's another guy who I really love the fact how passionate he is about the movement. I mean, he's a podcast listener. He listens to all our podcasts. Yeah. He's a fan of all the things that we're fighting for. So it just happens that he's also tech savvy, and he can use his talents to help the content that he likes and enjoys. So I love meeting people like that, and the whole community thing. I mean, one thing about podcasts and people listening, if you're thinking about starting a podcast, reach out to me. I'll help you out. Reach out to Truthzilla. They'll help you out.
Yep.
Jared,
for sure.
Yeah. So it's awesome. It's awesome how nice everybody is and how willing everybody is to help. And it really is a community. So hopefully we keep growing it. The Union Unwanted keeps growing. And like I told you, Scott, if Alex Jones is ever on, you guys will be the first to know.
Or if you ever get Melissa Floyd and Dr. Bob Sears, like they would be amazing on there, and make sure we're on there for that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Since they're going to plug their two people, can I plug?
Oh, yeah. She's got some too.
There's two. I have these dream people I want to talk to. Okay.
3. You have 3.
Who's my, before I ask you my third, I'll say the first two that I remember.
All right.
So Candace Owens, I really, really would love to have a group conversation with Candace and Owen Schroyer.
Owen Schroyer, InfoWars guy.
Yes, Owen.
And then David Ike.
David Ike.
Yeah. David
Ike would be just amazing.
So that is my, you're right. You're right.
We made a list. We went all back and forth recently. We're like, okay, everyone come up with like 3 guests that we can reach out to and, realistically kind of get on the show. And
it was like in a group chat. Scott's like, all right, who do you guys want to have?
And Megan's like, Candace Owens, David Ike, Owen Schroyer. I'm like, come on.
Megan,
What are you
how do you even contact these people, Megan? Come on.
To be fair, the last time they said that, I was like, can we book Charlie Robinson? And then Scott reached out and Charlie said yes. So I was like, can we reach out to Owen and Candace? Like, is that how that's going to work?
We'll get there.
Yeah, it really doesn't hurt to try. And you guys have had a lot of great guests on your show. So when they see that, when they look up your show and they see, Jason Burmis, Charlie Robinson, all these great people are on there, they're like, oh, I know those people. I like those people. I'll go on.
Ricky Varandas.
Yes.
Oh, he's been on. I've been trying to book that asshole forever. but yeah, it kind of reminds me of that joke where I forget which comedian said, they're like, him and his wife did the same thing. Like, hey, pick one celeb or one person that you could get a pass on that you would want to sleep with. If you run into them, I'll give you a pass. You can sleep with them. So the wife's like, I don't know, pick some like, Vin Diesel or whoever. And then it was the husband's turn. And he's like, oh, the waitress at Ruby Tuesdays. I'm like, why the fuck did you pick her? Because that's realistic. I can actually hook up with her. You just told me you'd give me a pass. So
man,
that's hilarious.
But the point is,
Anyone ever hear from him again?
If he after that comment, and if he was a functional medicine doctor, he's probably dead. Yeah.
Man.
But thanks, guys. We're gonna have
thank
to
you, Ricky.
Thank you so much.
Keep up the great work. I love how active you guys are in the community. Like the fact you guys are out there, you're meeting people, you're doing stuff. I love that. I know a lot of people in the alternative community have been saying we need more of that. So, I'm always bringing you guys up. I'm like, yo, the Truthzilla crew, they're out there, man. They're getting their hands dirty and not using sanitizer because.
That's the best compliment we've got yet, dude. I love it. Hell yeah.
But But thanks, guys. Hey, we'll
Ricky.
Stay in touch. And like I told you guys before, if there's ever been anybody on my show that I can help you guys out with, I'll do what I can. I mean, you guys are obviously doing great work, and like I said, it's a community. So as a community, we help each other out.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Ricky.
Thank you enough, Ricky.
Such a pleasure.
Sure.
So I'm so glad to talk to you this time.
Yeah.
Yes. Did good, Megan.
Megan. Sometimes I go on long rants and people are like,
it's so nice to have somebody that you like relate and you go through those same like little, like you understand the anxiety. And that's so nice to hear, because sometimes I feel like people just start talking and they're so like confident and on point, and I just feel like, oh my gosh, everyone, like, I just feel like it's so obvious that I feel like I'm not. So it's good and encouraging.
Yeah.
Like we needed you to rant the first show. This time you needed to break up our rants, really, right?
Yeah.
It flowed pretty well.
That's good.
Yeah, it was great.
Thank you, Ricky.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks, guys. Hey, we'll keep in touch and we'll talk soon, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. Soon.
Thank
All right,
you.
man. Have a good night.
See you guys.
Everybody, that was Ricky Varandas of the Ripple Effect podcast. What an intense and amazing interview. Gave me a lot of encouragement, a lot of relatability.
Yeah.
He's just a wonderful guy.
A really, really nice
so much
man.
Respect. And to be fair, like, we would not be where we're at today
without him.
Ricky Varandas.
Not at all.
For sure.
Not at all. Yeah.
Thank you, Ricky.
Such an awesome human. He's helped us out and supported us and encouraged us all along. So deeply, deeply grateful to you, Ricky. Thank you so much. The Ripple Effect podcast. I am Megan, sitting here with my wonderful friends, Scott and Ed, and we wish all of you intellectual prosperity. Good night.
Oh, Aaron M., thank you for the $2 tip. Pew, pew.
Pew, pew. Pew. Ding. Ding.